Hello, welcome to the virtual open day at Somerville College. I'm Quentin Miller. I'm the computation tutor at Somerville, and I'm here with my colleague.
Yeah, I'm Renaud Lambiot, so I'm a fellow in applied math, and so I'm a professor in the Mathematical Institute, and I'm in charge of the tutorials that are related to applied mathematics broadly.
Okay, we have the first question, which is what's the best thing about maths and/or computer science at Somerville? Okay, I'll speak on the computer science side, of course. Uh, well, computer science certainly at Oxford, I think is a wonderful course. Uh, it's There's a very particular approach that we have to computer science at Oxford, which is treating it very much as an engineering discipline. That is to say, rather than just giving technical skills, such as coding, we use, just as engineers in the traditional sense use maths to reason about the structures that they're going to create and how they'll behave, rather than just building bridges and seeing whether they stay up or not. We use maths and logic to reason about the programs that we're going to construct to see how they're going to behave before actually trying to run them. So I think it's a very good course at Oxford. It's a very good approach that we take. And Somerville, well, all the colleges have good teaching. They all have different characteristics. So some colleges are much older, some are newer. Some people prefer one or the other. Some colleges have specialities and things other than the actual discipline you're going to study, because that is important. Also, you're not going to be studying all the time, most of the time, but not all the time. So, certain colleges specialize in sport, in music, things like that. Somerville particularly, well, going back to the teaching, Somerville is one of a group of colleges who pool our upper year teaching in the second and third years, where we do much more teaching in the college rather than in the department. So you get more personal tuition than in some colleges. Okay, Renaud will speak to the maths side of this.
Yes, I will just comment about mathematics. And so, well, first of all, you probably know that Somerville was named after a mathematician. So clearly, mathematics is at the core of Somerville College. Now, again about Oxford. So math at Oxford is, I think, a very wonderful teaching experience for many reasons. One of them being that you are part of a large number of students. And so typically in the first year, there are about 300 students that are taking part in the courses in the Math Institute. And one of the particularity of Oxford is the fact that you combine these large classes, right, where this is what you receive in the lectures, which is combined with some more personal interactions that takes place inside colleges with your tutors. So you have the feeling to be part of a broad group. You have the possibility to meet many people, also to be in contact with many different types of professors having their own expertise. But at the same time, it's not like you're just one number among many numbers, because there are still these more human relations that take place inside the colleges, where as tutors, well, people like Quentin and I, well, we get to know personally the students. We meet them every week in small groups, typically groups of 2 or 3 people. Now, I think that really mathematics at Oxford is, well, it's clearly, I think, a wonderful experience and a very enriching one. Now, about Somerville itself, so, well, as Quentin said, well, the different colleges offer excellent teaching. This is clear. There are some differences that are maybe more in terms of the style and the values that they may have. Some are more conservative, others are maybe more progressive, if I may use the word. And I believe that Somerville would be part of the second group. And something that is also very practically important is the fact that, well, the Math Institute is next door to the college, which is something that is important, I suppose, for two reasons, right? The first one is the fact that, well, the teaching is divided in the first years between the college and the department. So having the possibility to go back and forth is going to be much more practical if you have to walk 200 meters instead of walking 3 kilometers. And I know that also for the students, having the possibility to wake up 10 minutes just a bit later is a very, very important quality that Somerville does have.
And the computer science department is also very close. One other thing I'll just say about maths and computer science at Somerville particularly is that even though these are, I mean, we have a joint degree in maths and computer science. We also have the individual degrees, just maths, just computer science. But for all of these students, even if they're studying just for the single honours degree, we do a lot of activities together as a group because, you know, even though the courses are different and the things you'll be examined in are different, we're all interested in the same sorts of things. So yeah, we do a lot of activities together as a big maths and computer science group. We have another question. For international students taking APs, what would be the required courses versus the recommended courses? Also, what is further maths in the context of APs? Again, please. Thank you. Okay, it's not clear whether this was about maths or computer science. The admissions requirements are a bit different. Okay. So there, if you go to the website, well, I'm looking at the computer science website right now. So if you go to Oxford Computer Science, right there on the front page, you'll see something about admissions. So you go there and there's a big list of all sorts of qualifications. So these are for people doing A-levels, IB, Scottish Highers, big section about overseas qualifications. So this is whether from the US, Ireland, Poland, Romanian, specific ones, as well as more generally. So I won't read these all out because you can go to the website and have a look at that. If anything isn't clear after seeing the website, yeah, do get in touch with the department, and we'll be very happy to clarify.
Yeah, and I will just answer the same. So I think that if you go to the web page of the Math Institute, this kind of information should be available. And if it's not clear, well, I would trust more people from the academic office than my own judgment on these questions. So please send them an email, and they are very, very reactive, and they will provide you, well, the answer that you need.
Yeah, because there are people in the department whose job it is to know exactly about all these things. So your question will go straight to them. Rino, your turn.
Okay, so when we're deciding which college to apply to, should we take the areas of expertise of the tutors into account, or should we mostly focus on the atmosphere of the college? Well, I think that both are important, clearly. So, well, the atmosphere is something that is important because you're going to be living there for, especially in the first year and maybe later on as well, depending on the colleges. So clearly the atmosphere is going to be part of where you live. And I wouldn't say that the college is a family, but it's a bit of a proxy for it, in the sense that you're going to be living there, you're going to be meeting people, you're going to be like living in this kind of bubble in a way for fairly long periods of time. 8 weeks can be very long. So it's good to be in a place where you fit, where you feel welcome, where you feel integrated. And about the area of expertise of the tutors, well, I think that it could be, if the English expression is good, the icing on the cake, right? So I think that all of the colleges have excellent tutors. This is true. Now, very often when students start their studies, they may have an idea of what they want to do afterwards, but it's going to change clearly along the way, because, well, the idea that we have about math, or the idea that we have about physics or about computer science, well, is going to be changed during the experience of being a student. And so it means that it's not because you want to do, let's say, number theory when you start, that you're going to be doing number theory for your dissertation in year 4 as a party student. It could be, but it's not necessary. So I think that indeed, like, if you're passionate about some topics, then why not? You could find tutors who are expert in it, and so that you can discuss these topics with them in a more privileged way. But if it's not the case, I would say that this is also fine, because the professors in the department tend to be very welcoming. And so if you want to talk to someone who's an expert in a certain field, and that field is not covered inside your college, so there is no one in our college doing, let's say, optimization, for instance, and then you can always contact a professor from the department, and they tend to be very easy to get access to and to talk to. I don't know if you want to complete this, Quentin.
I have nothing to add to that. Good answer. Okay. What happens in a maths or computer science interview? Will I need special technology for the virtual interviews this year? Okay. I'll start with the second part of that, special technology. Because you'll be interviewed by tutors from more than one college, at least two. Every tutor, every college is going to have a different set of questions. The interview will go slightly differently. I mean, this is intentional, so we get some views of you doing different sorts of things. Some of them will require special technology, specifically something like a tablet that you can write on, and we can see what you're writing, and you can see what we're writing. Some won't. Some will. For some, paper and pencil will be sufficient, and just occasionally you need to hold the paper up to the camera, and that will do. But we will ensure that everyone has access to the appropriate technology, everyone who is shortlisted. So if there's not an appropriate tablet already at your school, or you're not being interviewed at your school for some reason, we will make sure that everyone whom we want to interview will have the suitable technology.
But I think it's
going back to the
important.
first. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I just wanted to say it's something that is important to use something that you're comfortable with, because like interviews can be stressful experiences, even if we do our best to make it to make it like a good experience for everyone. We understand that it can be stressful, and the last thing that you want is to struggle with the technology, and to struggle with some device that you don't really know how to use, and because it's going to add to the complication of the interview itself. So I think that's clearly, the key is to use something that you know how to use, and a pen is something that most of us know how to use, I suppose. If you need to use an iPad, if it's recommended for certain interviews, it would be good that you try to practice a bit beforehand, just to make sure that you know how to, I don't know, to erase, how to write, that you don't feel lost just due to this kind of technological barrier.
But nothing we do with these will be terribly sophisticated. So if you can write with a pen on paper, you'll be fine. I'll just briefly say something about the first part. What happens in a maths and computer science interview? Well, if we've called you to interview, it's because we've seen a lot of exam results and expected exam results. So we've seen the result of the MAT, that's our own admissions result. We know your expected A levels and so on. We've seen enough evidence to know that your mathematical skills are good enough for us. So we're not testing you on more mathematical skills. We're not going to give you more questions and okay, can you come up with the right answer? These are intended to be a bit more like real tutorials, because this is a tutorial university where the teaching is based on tutorials, on one-to-one, two-to-one interaction, working through really difficult questions together. So what happens in an interview is mostly we will give you some interesting and difficult questions to work with, not necessarily to answer. I mean, if you come up with the answer eventually, that's fine. If you never actually manage to answer the question during the interview, that's also okay. We just want to get a sense of how you work with difficult questions with another person, which is what tutorials would be all about. So that's what happens in a maths and computer science interview. Now, someone has asked, if I'm applying to maths and computer science as a joint honours, will I have separate interviews or a joint one? if they're separate, what happens if I do badly in one and well in the other? Okay, everyone who is interviewed for any of these subjects will have at least two, usually three interviews. They will have interviews at least two different colleges. They are relatively short, the individual interviews, but cumulatively they add up to at least an hour. So rather than sitting you down for 1 hour and just one all or nothing interview, we have a number of shorter interviews, so we get a range of opinions. You working with a range of different problems with a range of different tutors, so we get a better overall picture of how you do with these things. And if you're applying to for any joint honors, such as maths and computer science, then certainly one of your interviewers will be a computer scientist, one will be a mathematician. Even if it's just one. I mean, because I have a maths degree from a long time ago, so I can, I do some maths interviews as well. They're not going to be very heavily. Again, as I said before, they're not okay. Here's yet another question. Work it out. Give us the answer. It's more about discussion. And yeah, if you apply for a joint honors subject, even if you apply for maths and computer science, the computer science interview won't necessarily be something very much about computers. It won't be. It might be something about programming. It might be just about some field of mathematics which is very useful for computer scientists. If you do badly in one and well in the other, which is the second part of this question, this is another reason that we do a number of interviews rather than just having one long interview and then it's all or nothing. So, if we look at the results and say, okay, this person had 3 interviews, 2 of them went really well, the other one not so well. Okay, well, we're good scientists. We know how to disregard outliers in the data. We say, okay, everyone has a bad moment where, well, this particular interview, for whatever reason, it just didn't work. From the other 2 interviews, looks like this person is pretty good. Yeah, you may be okay if you do badly in one and well in the
it's
other.
a matter of discussion between us, right? So at the end of all of the interviews, we're going to be exchanging our experience with the students, and if for instance, it can be that one interview went bad because the student was nervous, and this is something that we can also discuss and incorporate into the discussion. So if one goes bad, I think that don't lose hope, right? Just get a good glass of water, take a breath, and then do the second one and try to do your best.
How does the Oxford Computer Science course compare with the Cambridge course? Well, they're both excellent. It's well, as I said before, we largely because of the history of this. Computer science is such a new field in universities, comparatively new. So in different universities, it has arisen from different existing fields. So in some universities, it grew out of the engineering department. In some, it grew out of the maths department, and so on. So this will give a different flavor to the courses in different universities. And there isn't necessarily a best course for computer science. It's what approach really appeals to you. So have a look. Yeah, have a look at the websites of certainly these universities and some other universities and see try and get a feel for what they what they think computer science is all about. Renaud, your turn.
Yes. So how much do you take GCSEs into account in shortlisting offers? Do I need all 8s and 9s to have a chance? Well, the thing that clearly for the shortlisting, what we we base ourselves, well, what we do is we take the whole, basically, well, the whole application, all of the information that would be available for us. That would mean the scores that you have for the MAT, right? That would be a first one. That is something very instructive. But also, well, your motivation letter, well, the letters that come from your school, clearly the scores that you had at school. So all of these things would be taken as a whole. Now, so I'm not entirely sure about the 8s and the 9s to have a chance. So I do suppose that if you do extremely well for the MAT, right, that would be the sign for us that indeed you do have the math skills that are sufficient in order to be offered the chance to come to an interview. Now, nonetheless, you know that what is, I believe, more important at the school level is the fact that, well, if you were to receive an offer, well, then there would be some conditions that you would need to satisfy by the end of your studies. And so it means that clearly, well, having the right marks at school is going to be something that is going to be really important in order to satisfy and to fulfill these conditions. So do you want to add something on question 7, Quentin, or do you think it's sufficient?
No, I think you've covered it well.
Yeah.
Okay, this next question I think is definitely yours.
Yes, so the compulsory dissertation in the 4th year of math, is there support in learning how to write essays, given that you might not have written any since our GCSEs? Well, actually, it's a good question. So I supervised each year something like 5 to 10 actually math essays in the last year, and so because there are different masters, because there are the party students, but then we also have masters in math called MMSCs, MPhOC, so the masters where students would come from abroad, to do 1 year of master, where you also do have like a compulsory dissertation. And every year I'm really impressed by the very, very good quality that these dissertations have, not only in terms of the writing, but also in terms of the content that they do have. Now, the thing is that I don't know if there's a specific course on essay writing, but along the way, you have other essays that you need to write. So it means that you're going to be learning along the way what is the good practice in order to write essays associated to mathematics. Is there a specific course on that? To be honest, I don't know the answer. Is there one in computer science, Quentin?
Not specifically, no. I mean, yes, we have also the 4th year dissertations. Yeah. But yeah, this won't be your the first time since your arrival at Oxford that you will have been writing essay style questions or short essays of one form or another.
And the thing that as Quentin said earlier, so this is a tutorial system. So it means that because it's a tutorial system, along the way, every week you will have to submit some material to us. It won't be essays, but nonetheless, it will already be something in which you're going to be having to explain what you do by writing it. And so it means, and this is clearly something that you also see along the course of the first year, where there is no essay, is the fact that, well, the solutions that are provided by the students initially and at the end of the year, well, obviously they will cover more complicated questions, but also they're going to gain in clarity. And so something that you will learn along your years is going to be able to explain what you do. And usually, well, the key quality for writing good essays is, empathy for the reader and clarity. And this is clearly something that you're going to learn along the way, initially through solutions, then shorter essays, and towards the end for your dissertation, you have a long one. It's a challenge. I won't say this is true. It's a wonderful challenge because it's the first time that you dedicate a lot of time to just one piece of research, but most of the time the students tend to like it very much. So I think that would be for you, Quentin, this question
9. Does Oxford compete in the International Collegiate Programming Contest or any other competitive programming? I don't think so, but our students take part individually in all sorts of programming competitions, which are happening all the time. Something about maths?
Hello, does a math degree also include compulsory computer science courses? I enjoy math, but not interested in computing, programming yet, etc. yet. Well, there's going to be some of it because, well, clearly, well, the things that you're going to learn, I don't know exactly what are the, there is a course of, well, like computational mathematics. And so you're going to be having some courses on numerical analysis, for instance. And these will include the need to be able to program initially in fairly simple languages like MATLAB. So clearly, you're going to learn. This is something that you will, it's going to be one of the skills that you will need to learn. Now, the level to which you're going to learn it is going to depend on your options. Because clearly in the first years, there is like, there are few options, but in first year, there is no option. It starts afterwards in year 2, but starting at year 3 and 4, then you can really go into directions that are closer to your own interest. And so if you go into more applied mathematics, then clearly you're going to be having to be able to program in, well, MATLAB, people do usually Python or sometimes C++. But if you go towards pure mathematics, then I think that you're going to be safe without any kind of programming. So there's going to be a bit of it, especially in the second year. But yeah, in the level that you're going to reach is going to depend on the option that you take, typically starting at the third year.
Okay, the website says you work on a personal project in the 3rd and 4th year of computer science. Do you have any favorite examples of projects done by 3rd and 4th year students? Well, of course, this is going to be influenced by by my own favorite topics, the things I'm interested in. Yeah, I've supervised some of these projects, and they're all really great because they involve a surprising amount of original work, original research. I mean, this is genuine research, and favorite examples. Well, all the ones I've supervised, certainly, because I supervise ones that are in topics that I'm interested in or specializing in. So yeah, these are ones to do with typically with language design, theory behind languages, analysis of programming languages, that sort of thing. But I mean, the range is vast. You know, some of them are completely theoretical. Some of them are very much more practical. And yeah, by the 3rd or 4th year, something will have caught your interest, and you go for that. And the range of what it might be is enormous. And you will then be supervised by someone who is a specialist in this area. So it won't necessarily be your college tutor, one of your college tutors. But it's a big department. There are a lot of people specializing in a lot of things. So there'll be someone for whom that is their field, and they will guide you through it.
And I can say that in math, usually the problem is more like restricting the possibilities. So I know that many students, well, they have too many potential projects. They are interested in many things, and at some point they need to choose one. And so the choice, the problem is sometimes more to choose one topic more than having to find one. I think that would be our last question, I suppose, because we're going to be ending soon.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So we have question. So what is a tutorial like? How many students are there in a tutorial on average? So the tutorials are, well, it depends on the colleges. So here I can say about what's happening in Somerville. So typically in Somerville, in math, as in for computer science, what we have is that so each week students have some questions, like mathematical or computer science questions that they need to work on during the week. They need to submit their solutions to us. We mark them, and then we meet the students the next day or the day after. And the whole tutorial is going to be based on what the students provided us, because it helps us to find out what are maybe the difficulties that they may have in certain aspects of the material. And typically what's happening is that tutors are going to be explaining specific questions or specific concepts on the board in very small groups, typically groups where you have 2 or 3 students with the tutor. Everything is on the whiteboard, well, if COVID allows us to do so. And the thing that, well, this is also aimed to be a discussion. So because it's a small group, there is no need to be intimidated in any way. We talk in a fairly equal level. And very often we also invite the students to go on the board and to explain to us and to their peers some solution that they found by themselves. So the idea is, well, to provide this kind of like very tailored information, something that is tailored to the needs of the students from the feedback that we had from them, but also to give them the possibility to explain what they do, because usually, and I think that everybody agrees on that, you really understand something when you know how to explain it. The key, the only way to know if you really understand something is that if you can explain it to one of your friends. And so this is one opportunity in which you can explain it to, well, to your friends, but also to the tutors.
Okay, there's an important question for you right now.
Yeah, so I was wondering how many girls join math in Somerville in an average year. So, so Somerville was historically like a girl-only college. It's probably, it was one of the first ones that was created in the 19th century. So it opened up to, well, to all genders in the 1990s, if I'm correct. Now, typically, I would say that in math, we have almost half of the students would be females. So I think that in math, like single math, we have like around 8 students each year coming in, and every year I think that we have three female, around 3 female and around 5 male. So I don't think that we have the exact balance, but we are close to it. So like girls are not alone in a crowd of men. We tend to have a more balanced configuration. And something that is very nice as a female, from what I hear, is that, so very often when you go to in a college, you have like a dining hall, and you're surrounded by the portraits of the important people who are associated to the college, and in most of them, you would be surrounded by males. You're going to be surrounded by men. Well, if you go to Somerville, you'll see that all of the portraits are only of women. So I think that it's also a way for you to be
all women and one cat, actually.
Sorry, there is one cat. Was it a female cat?
Yes.
Or was it a male? I don't know.
Male cat. But
Oh, that means so. But nonetheless, I think that it changes a bit. It provides you like some a feeling of welcoming, and being part of a place where you belong, I think. Shall we continue? We are supposed to stop at 9:30 or not? I don't know exactly, because we have a lot.
Well, as long as questions are coming in, let's keep going.
Okay, perfect. Until we are interrupted. So please, could you say if it is possible to apply for deferred entry in math? Do you ever consider such applications? I think we do, don't we, Quentin?
We do, certainly, in both subjects.
We last year, I think.
But
so.
What we do like to see in an application for deferred entry is why you're deferring, and if you have some good reason, some worthy reason for deferring. So we'd like to get some idea of what you plan to do in your year between school and university.
Yeah, I fully agree.
But yes, such things are allowed. Okay, we have just been asked to wrap up, so let's do so. So, nice to be able to talk to everyone. Hope we've answered some questions satisfactorily, and do get in touch with the college if you have any other questions about anything that we haven't answered yet.
Yeah, thank you for being with us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, thank you. So you're in the session here with Somerville Classics tutors. You've got three of us. I'll start introducing myself. I'm Beata Dignas. I'm the ancient historian in the college. I'm a Greek historian, but teach Greek and Roman history. And my personal interests are in Greek religion and ancient Anatolia.
I'm Dr. Charlotte Potts.
It seems to be ish now.
Okay, we'll continue to introduce ourselves. I'm Charlotte Potts. I'm the tutor for archaeology at Somerville. I'm the lecturer in Etruscan archaeology, which is the civilization in Italy that predated the Romans, but I teach all of the Roman material culture papers as well, and I've got special interests in architecture and religion.
Yeah, I believe our third colleague has disappeared. I can't see Luke right now, and clearly he can't introduce himself. So should be with us, Luke Pitcher, who's our language and literature tutor, and he's a specialist in ancient historiography.
Luke,
shall we just go ahead and see if we get Luke?
Yeah, I'm here, actually.
Oh, you're there. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
I can't see you.
So I'm Luke Pitcher. I'm the fellow in classical literature. As Beata was saying, I'm mostly interested in ancient history, the literary aspect of the writing of history in the ancient world. I teach most of the literature options.
Right, I think we've got our first question coming in from the site, which is, why is Somerville a great place to study classics and CAR and AMH? And AMH is short for ancient and modern history. So obviously already we have a range of degrees that you can study if you come to Somerville. And that's in particular because we have so many tutors. There's actually 4 of us. We also have an ancient historian. So we have, I think we're the only college with the full complement. And that means we get a really great classics cohort, as well as lots of people and lots of resources. Beata and Luke might want to say a bit more about some of the resources and skills we have in-house.
Yes, I mean, as Charlotte was saying, the ancient world, at school you've only been introduced, or mainly been introduced to the language and literature, some of you classical civilization, and have done a little bit of history and archaeology. We've got kind of a broad range of disciplines, and there's a fourth classics tutor, an ancient philosopher, Karen Nielsen, who's also a fellow at the college. And yeah, you've got the 3 of us here representing ancient history, classical archaeology, and language and literature. So that's what makes Somerville kind of a vibrant place for classics. We've got, as a consequence, quite a good cohort, because we admit every year about 5 to 6 students in classics, and then the related joint courses, classics and modern languages, classics and oriental studies. And then we've got about 3, sometimes even 4 students in CAR, classical archaeology and ancient history, and always 2, sometimes even 3 students in ancient and modern history. So that gives us on the undergraduate level sort of a good cohort. And we also have graduate students in classics, which broadens that. And we try to also intensify links between undergraduates and postgraduate students.
I should say we have a fantastic college library as well. I think possibly the best college library outside the departmental university library, where students who are staying in college, and even if you're living outside, you can come in and work and study there. And we have a phenomenal range of resources. Luke?
And having those sorts of resources on site does make a difference, because if you're thinking about the actual difference that college life makes within your university career, it is certainly true that whatever option you want to do within classics, you can choose and will be sent out to someone in the university to do. But if you don't have the resources for that in your college, you get sent out to a specialist in another college, which is fine. And that's one of the great things about Oxford. You have access to so many resources across the whole of the university. But a lot of work within Somerville itself, possibly to a greater extent than you.
I think Luke might have
Always
frozen.
can.
Oh, no, there we are. Sorry, Luke. I was just going to chime in and say we even have our own museum collection of teaching objects, of classical artifacts as well in-house. So across all different media, all different kinds of resources, we've got an awful lot here. And it's a very pretty place, and you can sit on the grass.
Yes, and our location is very convenient because we're so close to the Sackler Library, to the Ashmolean Museum, and to the Classics Centre. You may have visited events in the department already today, or are going to. The Ioannou Centre is sort of a 3 to 5 minute walk away from Somerville.
We've got another question here. Someone's asking, I want to apply for the Classical Archaeology and Ancient History course, but I haven't had much experience with engaging in archaeology. Do you have any recommendations for how to build up my application? Well, the first thing to say is you don't have to have done any before you come. This is a course, like all the classics options, where you can start without previous experience. As we say in all the admissions material, what we're looking for is a set of skills and enthusiasm, most importantly at the start. So some students may have gone on digs, may have had some voluntary experience in museums, but more than that, we'd like to see evidence of things you've read, places you've been, things you've seen on TV that have got you really excited about archaeology, that you've been thinking about, that you'd like to learn more about. Obviously, given COVID restrictions, it's a lot harder to get into museums, to do internships, to do voluntary work in the last year, but that's not something we're going to judge you on. In admissions, we'll give you sets of exercises that will do things like test your facility with looking at things and understanding things, and those are the skills that we'll be looking at. So I'd say read around what you're interested in, have a look at things online, don't worry too much about whether you've actually had a go at digging or working in a museum before you come.
Yeah, I can just second that. We do not expect any previous experience. It doesn't hurt, of course, to start thinking about, wow, the ancient world, what are visual aspects of this ancient world and where do I encounter them? You know, as you travel, as you even might look at Oxford, yes, step into the museums and have a look and see how artifacts, you know, link with what you are doing at school at the moment, whether it is some classical civilization, whether it is the ancient languages. But no, I can certainly second that. We do not expect, you know, a long list of this is the excavations I've participated in, or this is the course I've taken. Don't worry about that. But certainly just live out your interest, read around the subject, and visit places where you can see visual culture.
And I think we've got a question now which Beata might be well placed to field.
Yeah, let me read it out. How much opportunity is there to incorporate ancient history into a history and language joint school? That is a good question. There is an opportunity, but it is not, the three courses that I normally teach in are, of course, classics, classical archaeology and ancient history, and ancient and modern history. So this would be a course that is not among those three, but I have taught sort of main school history students, and also, of course, there's even more limits to studying history if you do a joint degree with language. There are certain subjects, for example, Augustan Rome in the first year, the world of Homer and Hesiod, that's where I have taught students who are main school historians, and I believe that is also open to history and languages. In the second part of the course, there's a limited choice. But yes, I have to say there would not be much ancient history in that configuration, but some are available.
Now we have a question that all three of us can field. What is the difference between classics and CAR, and how can I choose between them? And is there much overlap? So my colleagues will obviously tell me if I've got this wrong. The main thing is focus. Okay, so a classics degree mainly focuses on literature and language, but you have opportunities to do papers in archaeology and ancient history and other things to supplement that. The focus in the classical archaeology and ancient history degree is on archaeology and ancient history. You can do languages within it. You cannot do literature papers. Within that, each degree has special opportunities. So I might pass to Luke to talk about what the classics degree offers and then come back to us to talk about what the CAR degree offers in contrast. So Luke, do you want to speak about literae humaniores or classics?
Okay, so as Charlotte said, it's very much about focus. So within the classics degree, or literae humaniores as it's known here, or single honours classics as it's sometimes called, you have options across the range of language, literature, history, archaeology, and philosophy, including modern philosophy. You would be doing a certain minimum of language work. So the language within the main classics school. So you will definitely, you have the option, and many of our students do, to study for the single honours classics degree, but you will certainly be doing some language work. And that's extra options which you don't get in some of the other joint schools, like say, for example, Greek textual criticism or Latin textual criticism. But equally, there will be certain specialised archaeological options, for example, which you can do in CAR, which you can't do, the CAAH, which you can't do in the main classic school. So it's really a matter of focus of the schools. But if you're particularly interested in, say, the languages and the literature, you're probably going to want to do single honours classics or one of the classics joint schools at classics and modern languages, whereas if in classical archaeology, then and you don't want to do as much language, then it might well be that classical archaeology and ancient history is a better fit.
I mean, if you imagine a Venn diagram, there is some overlap in the middle between the two degrees, but it's not like 50%. There are a few courses that are shared between them, like art under the Roman Empire, Greeks in the Mediterranean world. But if you do CAR, there are, as Luke said, a whole range of other specialist options that you cannot do if you take straight classics. So as well as specialist ancient history and archaeology, there's also a chance to extend beyond the classical world with papers like Etruscan Italy, Egyptian art and architecture, and to do things like maritime archaeology. And we also have a compulsory fieldwork component. You can apply to do fieldwork if you do LitHum, but it's not built into the same degree in the same way. So I'll pass to Beata now.
Yes, as ancient historian, I'm probably the one who's most kind of equally invested in both courses. My classic students, when they are interested in ancient history, can actually create a course where they do more ancient history than literature, then philosophy, then archaeology. In classical archaeology and ancient history, the balance is, to begin with, more prescribed. And Luke, you froze for me several times, so forgive me if I reiterate what you said. I find that it's the students who come to us who haven't done any ancient languages before who find this choice hardest between Classics 2 or CAR, because they don't know yet, will I enjoy language learning? And that is indeed not easy. It is definitely true that if you study classics, during the first 2 years of your degree, you will have to spend a lot of time with language learning. And so there is less opportunity to study the subjects that Charlotte listed, in particular, on the classical archaeology side, but also on the ancient history side. But you can do languages in CAR. For those who have done some Greek or Latin, I think they know more. Yes, I enjoy the language. I would like to further this and work with the ancient texts and material in the original as well as in translation.
It's also worth thinking about what you want to do at the other end after your degree. Obviously, haven't got a crystal ball and don't know what you'll be feeling in 3 or 4 years. But if you know that you'd like to go into further study or professions where close textual engagement is a good thing, then classics would be a better fit for you than classical archaeology and ancient history. If you want to become a professional archaeologist or work in the museum sector or something like that, obviously classical archaeology and ancient history will give you a slightly better grounding there. But all of the subjects teach the full complement of transferable skills in critical thinking, in communication, in writing. So it's not as arbitrary, but it's about focus, really.
Good. There's a new question, if that's maybe enough on this question. There's a new question. Is there a classic society at Somerville? There is. And it, of course, enthusiasm always sort of lives with those who take charge. And so we're always very interested in seeing new students coming up who want to engage themselves in the Classic Society, organise events. There is certainly, the framework is there. And we had a few years ago a very active Classic Society. The pandemic, of course, has made it so much harder for students to organise events. We've tried to keep things alive via online events. But now, of course, is the opportunity, now that we're going back to real face-to-face events and again, a social atmosphere in college. I'm very confident that we will have a lively Classic Society. And again, what I said before, that also engages the link between undergraduates and postgraduate students, because we have this very lively postgraduate group of 10 students. We also have 2 postdoctoral fellows, junior research fellows that work on the ancient world and that are very keen to engage with undergraduates and with postgraduates in the framework of the Classic Society.
Might also be useful to flag up that because you'll be a member of both the college and the department, we also have a huge array of lectures and events and social things that often go on through the department as well. And one of the wonderful things about being a student at Oxford is lots of people whose books you've probably read or people you've seen on TV do come through and give talks. So you're able to go and see them. And so there's the opportunity to go to things and organise things within your college, but also there'll be things in the faculty for the social side as well that you can participate in.
And indeed, you will be able, even because this is today,
I think you
froze. Or another. One way or another, it's a rare week when there isn't a possibility for to go and hear an eminent speaker or do some kind of additional.
Yeah, apologies if Luke's comments weren't audible there. He froze for me, but I don't know whether how that is on your end.
Well, just until we get him back, we've got a car question that's come in as well. Could you talk a bit about the museum site report required as part of the car course? Okay, that's what in many degrees is regarded as the compulsory dissertation or the undergraduate thesis. Most of your course is focused on weekly essays and getting your head around a tutorial topic every week, and then there is a 3-hour exam at the end. So you're constantly, quickly dipping into different topics that all complement each other, but it's about moving very quickly from one to the other. Your site and museum report is done over a much longer span of time, 3 or 4 terms, including a summer vacation. And it's your chance to really get into one particular topic in depth. It aims to bring the 2 halves of the degree together. So it starts by either choosing an archaeological site or an artifact or a group of artifacts, really looking closely at them, spending time with them in multiple visits, learning how to catalogue them, describe them, and then using them to explore an element of ancient history. So a part of ancient society, to think about what archaeology can contribute to the reconstruction of ancient society that you might not get going the other way. Students have done a huge range of topics for this kind of thing in the past, and the only limits are what is practical and what can be supervised. So you don't need to pick your topic until well into your second year, so you've got time to explore different options. But as I say, it's the chance to develop those other skills in extended thinking, extended writing, extended research, and to dip your toe in the research pool and see if research is something that you might like to continue on doing after your degree.
Yes, I think that's an important point, that those students who decide over the course of maybe their first or second year that, gosh, I like this so much, I would like to do a postgraduate degree, maybe a master's degree, or maybe even a doctorate. The Site and Museum report, the thesis element, gives you a taster of that. And that applies also in the classics courses. In ancient modern history, it is also compulsory to write a thesis. So in classics it's optional, but in all courses it is the opportunity to develop that depth and this kind of research style work that would then become your focus were you to do a postgraduate degree. But I also think it is, I mean, every student I've encountered is hugely proud actually of what they achieve when they write such a thesis, whether it is a museum report or a site report, or whether it is a thesis in classics. You can even do an optional thesis in addition to the compulsory elements, or you can replace one paper with a thesis. But students normally find it very rewarding, and they, of course, that's again what we do at Oxford. You've got an advisor who works very closely with you and helps you, of course, through this process.
We've got another question. Is there any chance to do practical sessions such as the Ashmolean? Would this be limited to CAR students rather than classics? Okay, I'll answer with museums first rather than fieldwork experience, which you can definitely do. Museums, yes, absolutely. But it is determined by mostly the courses you do and the tutors who teach them. So, for instance, when I teach Art Under the Roman Empire, that is a paper that you can take in CAR, and you can take it in classics. It's open to both. And part of that course involves a practical session in the Ashmolean behind the scenes in the antiquity study room, holding bits of Roman art and actually looking at them in 3 dimensions and thinking about what questions we can ask of them. In contrast, if you take the Etruscan Italy paper I teach, which is a CAR-only paper at this point, half of the entire course is taught in the Ashmolean every week, off gallery in the study room with real objects, learning about object handling. That said, by practical sessions, I'm not sure if you mean hands-on or just in the Ashmolean, a lot of other courses also take students to the galleries in the Ashmolean and teach in the galleries. I should say with the pandemic, these opportunities have been severely curtailed and most of them haven't happened, but hopefully as things move on, we can get back to doing that normally.
There's a new question. What does an interview look like for each of the different courses? Well, first one should probably say they're very similar. We want to get to know you. We present you with a test, a challenge, and hope to get to know how you think, how you deal with a challenge that is put in front of you in the moment. If I differentiate now between the 3 courses in classics, and Luke may want to expand on that, it is likely that you'll be given a short text in translation, or with a translation if you have background knowledge in Greek or Latin, and you will give you some preparation time, and then we'll ask you some questions and see how you deal with certain elements of the text, whether it's language, whether it's just an understanding of what the author, what maybe a poet would have tried to express. So very much the kind of work that you would do too in your A-level work in school. And then we also talk to you about your statement that you've put on your UCAS form, so to really also, not to surprise you with anything, but precisely ask you about your interests that you've expressed in your application. Charlotte, do you want to talk about CAR?
Yes, I mean, obviously for CAR, you have two separate interviews, an ancient history one and an archaeology one at your first college. Because of the way the admissions process works, you might have more than that interviews. And in that case, we'll give you, instead of a text, often an image or an artifact, could be a plan. And just like Beata said, see how we work through it together, through prompts, through what you bring to it, ask you questions about it. And we're looking for those advertised skills in visual acuity, expression, etc. They are not designed in any way to test prior knowledge. And in fact, often we try and give you something that we expect you haven't ever seen before or know anything about, because we want to see fresh how you come to it. So in some ways, it shouldn't matter what background you come, but those inherent skills and interest and enthusiasm and your ability to work with us to see if we can work together in that way, how far we can get through the text or the image to come to an understanding of it.
Yes, the fact that there are two interviews, you probably know this in every subject, there will be two interviews. So what I was describing on the classic side would be kind of the first interview. In the second interview, you may well encounter Charlotte together with our ancient philosophy colleague, giving you a task that relates to their particular field. As an ancient historian, I also tend to give, for example, in the CAR ancient history interview, I tend to give applicants either one or several texts that they get to read beforehand, and then I ask them about how texts relate to each other, how they illuminate from different perspectives a certain question or theme. So again, of course, I will take things more in the direction of ancient history, but then all together, of course, it's all classics fellows that, see what kind of candidate do we have here, and would they be students who would thrive at Somerville and in our subject.
And I think we can hear Luke, even though we can't see him. So Luke, would you like to say anything about that side of the interviews?
For the classics interviews, as Beata said, a considerable component will be an exercise involving a passage where if you already have a background in the language, it will be in Latin, but if you don't, there will just be a translation, but there will always be a translation. And if you do have the language, part of the exercise will be comparing the Latin with the translation. But in any event, it will be largely nothing especially fancy. We're often just trying to work out how, take the poem apart, see how it says, say what it's trying to say. So again, there's nothing especially pyrotechnic here. It's not very, any particular sort of higher mysteries of literary criticism, because with appropriate changes, again, as Charlotte was saying, for to work with something you haven't seen before.
I should say we try and be very friendly at Somerville for interviews as well. We try not to be too intimidating. And as I say, it's more about just having fun with it and seeing how you go with it. It's not a test of prior knowledge at all. We're more interested in you as a student and your potential.
You can actually verify that, I think, later in the student session this afternoon scheduled. There are two of our students participating. I think Nina and Lowry, one doing ancient and modern history and one doing classics. They will verify what Charlotte just said. Please don't feel it will be a daunting experience. It should be a positive experience, absolutely, and you should come out of it thinking, wow, I enjoyed that, and I really want to do this subject now, we're hoping.
So I think that's probably where we need to wrap it up, but hopefully we've managed to answer some of the questions that you came in with. And as Beata said, please feel free to pick the minds of our students, past and present, and the ones who've been through all this before as well. Okay,
all the best of luck with the application process, and enjoy the rest of the open day. Have a look at the department activities as well.
Okay, bye.
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 Hiya. Hi guys. So my name is Leah. I'm a first year PPE, so that means I study philosophy, politics and economics. In fact, I'm not first year anymore, I'm going into second year. I'm obviously at Somerville and I'm from London.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah. I'm currently studying medicine, so I'm a second year medicine student and I come from Milton Keynes.
Hi, I'm Dominic. I'm a going into second year mathematics student, and I'm from Brighton in Sussex. So I think that's the introductions. So just waiting on questions. So question 1, why did you choose Somerville, and how would you recommend choosing a college? So I went to the open days in person, which obviously you can't do. And I decided quite quickly that I didn't really want one of the super central ones. And Somerville was right next to the maths department. So it was one of the ones that I wanted to go and visit. And I visited, I really loved the quad, basically. And that's pretty much it. That's how I picked Somerville.
Yeah, so I I picked Somerville because I'd heard that there was one feminist philosopher in the whole of Oxford, which I think is a lie, because she's left now and they're still offering feminist philosophy. But her name was Mari Mikkola and she was a professor at Somerville. So I kind of looked her up and I found Somerville, and I hadn't even seen a picture of it before I sort of just pressed apply. And then I kind of came round and visited, and I'm really glad I picked it. But that's not how I'd recommend picking. It's just sort of putting a pin in the map. I would say, like, do your research and kind of have a look around, but obviously, especially this year, there's a lot of people being kind of pulled and put in different places to where they expected. So yeah, it's not, take it from someone who did put a pin in the map and ended up somewhere that they found I really enjoy. It's not worth like stressing too much about which one you end up in.
Yeah, no, I'd say the same as Dominic. I was lucky enough to get to visit Somerville, and it was just a lovely place. And I think it was just the atmosphere and talking to other current students there that's really useful. Obviously, things are nowadays online, but I know that some colleges put on virtual tours, and you can also get to chat with student ambassadors online. So definitely do try that. I think another thing that was also quite nice was that for Somerville, if you wanted to, you can choose to live in college for your duration of your degree. So that was also quite a unique part of Somerville that I quite liked. But I would say choose a college based on what is a priority for you. So do you want maybe a smaller college, or is it something about certain facilities at other ones? But even then, sometimes you might end up at a college that you didn't put as your preference, but most of the times people are happy with where they end up going. So don't worry too much about it.
I didn't say how I'd recommend choosing a college. I think Sarah has said like quite a good answer, really, especially for this year when there's not so much to go on apart from like whether they offer accommodation for all years. Is it a big college or a small college, location? These are the main things you can go off if you can't visit. I'd say if you can visit, you can go off vibes a lot more, which I do recommend. But I suppose this year, I mean, go off what you can, and yeah, it doesn't really. It's not the end of the world.
So the second question is, how close is Somerville to the center of town and subject departments? Well, I'd say to the center of town, Somerville might be like a 10-minute, 15-minute walk. You guys can chip in if I'm wrong. And then the subject departments obviously differs what department you have. For the medicine department, I think it's only like, again, a 10-minute, 15-minute walk. It's really not far. You can pretty much get everywhere by walking. So it's not too far off. When we say it's like not close, it's not like distant. It's still manageable to walk to different areas across Oxford.
It's small. Yeah. Yeah, the philosophy department, I think, is right next door. Obviously, we haven't really been in the departments this year. So, you know as well as I do where the politics and economics ones are, but I've been told they're about, 15, 20 minutes away. So, yeah, I mean, as a Londoner, like Oxford is tiny. So when people say things are far away, they mean it's a 15-minute walk. Yeah.
Yeah. It's about, I'd say 10, 15 minutes. If you're walking briskly, it's 10. I'd say it's actually quite good for a lot of subject departments, like, for example, computer science. A lot of the STEM ones are at the top of town. Like, I do maths. My accommodation next year, I can basically look inside the maths department from my building. It's like about 1 minute walk. So it's, I mean, not that I'll actually, maybe I'll get to go in, but
accommodation. So I'm the domestic officer, so I feel like I should be able to answer this. So there are kitchens available for everyone. So
you want to read out the question?
Oh yeah, sorry. What's the accommodation like at Somerville? Do you like it? Are there kitchens, self-catering facilities, ensuite rooms available? Are the rooms single or shared? Okay. So the accommodation, I think we can all answer this. I really love the accommodation. I'm living in Park, which is a kind of beautiful Victorian building. And I think it's very pretty. But what about you guys?
So I live in Vaughan, which is the large brutalist building in Somerville. It's I actually appreciate it, though it's tends to be the butt of quite a few jokes. Because I think the rooms are really good. They're quite large, especially in comparison to other unis. When you go around other unis and then you go to Oxford rooms, it's like they're palatial. The kitchens, there's self-catering facilities. They're not amazing, but I mean, you can eat. So I've got like 2 hobs, a microwave, a kettle, and 2 mini fridges. It was 1 but upgraded for 2, and that's for 10 people. So you can cook. I cooked quite a lot of meals because I'm vegan and there's only 1 vegan meal a day for lunch or supper, so I have to cook 1, and it's totally doable. You'll be fine.
Yeah, just to add to that quickly, I was living in Holby for the first year, and we also had kitchen available, but you can also choose to, now our dining hall should be open, so you could also alternatively choose to go and eat there if you wanted to.
Yeah, I think Somerville's hall is gorgeous and cheap, so that's what most people do, especially now that we can actually all sit together and kind of enjoy it. And Park has a massive kitchen that's shared between the whole building, and it's very well serviced. In terms of en-suites, there are en-suites available. They're not generally available for first years unless you have specific requirements. So we have given a first year en-suite this year because of specific requirements, and all the rooms are your own room. You don't have to share a room. Yes.
You could do the entire year self-catered. I think there were about 3 weeks where I didn't go to hall, so it's like totally feasible.
The next question is, does Somerville have green spaces which are open to students? I know other colleges have fields or gardens. So I know that Somerville, we do have lots of green spaces, especially like the squad. That's nice, especially during summertime for you to sit on. But then also, besides just in Somerville, Oxford just generally has loads of nice parks around which you can walk to. But Somerville itself does have nice green spaces. So they do have that if you're looking for that.
And uniquely, Somerville's one of the only colleges where you can sit on the quad. Like, I've been to various other colleges and they've got these kind of pristine, gorgeous green spaces that you're not allowed to sit on. So I really enjoyed, particularly last term, kind of sitting out and kind of studying or eating or whatever. And we're also, I think, potentially the closest college to Port Meadow, which is this kind of gorgeous, for me anyway, as a Londoner, it's a gorgeous kind of wild space. There's cows there and you can watch the sunset. It's very pretty. That's my favourite green space in Oxford.
Yeah, so the quad's actually pretty large in comparison to other colleges. So there's only one. So lots of colleges will have like lots of small quads. Somerville is sort of designed differently. It's like there's a sort of ring of buildings, except it's more of like, I know, a rectangle or something around like this very large sort of like just, I don't know, grass area. And it's, yeah, you can sit on, like we had some tutorials outside. Also, it's very close to the university parks as well, and Port Meadows, as Leah mentioned. So there are like, so the two, I'd say, main Oxford parks, it's because it's like towards the top of town, it's actually pretty close to both of them, which is really good. So question 5, what's the food like in Hull? It's pretty good. There are quite a few options. There's salad, then there'll be hot meals. There's always a vegetarian or vegan option if you're worried about that. I mean, I quite like it. Yeah, that's all I can really say.
I'm like quite a picky eater. I like growing up, and that's kind of lasted into my adulthood. But I really like all food, and I'll happily eat it. It's pretty decent, especially formal food. Is like, I don't know. It's yeah, it's nice. It's good. It's perfectly, you know, you could sustain yourself for a whole term eating full food.
Yeah, no, I would definitely say it tastes really good. I like whole food. So I do tend to go there a lot. And I feel like they vary the cuisine as well. It's not always the same thing. And it's affordable, so very useful.
Oh, sorry. We've been asked to explain the difference between formals and normal dining. So formals are every week. Yeah, we'll have like a formal on Fridays, and you don't have to go to every single one at all. But then it's like slightly more expensive, and you get table service, and people get dressed up and kind of sit with their friends and have a bit of a drink if they want to. And often Jan, our principal, comes in and does a little toast. And it's just a kind of nice way for people to kind of eat together at the end of the week and kind of, you know, experience the sort of Oxford tradition of like formality. But our ones, Somerville's ones, compared to a lot of others, are slightly less formal. Like you can just wear like a skirt and a top if you want. Like it's not like super like wear a ball gown or whatever. I don't know. It's a bit more laid back.
Wow.
Then one question is, what does Somerville do well compared to other colleges? Ooh. I would say just one thing from being at Somerville is you just feel like you're just this close-knit community. And obviously I'm not a student at other colleges, but I think you just do get that impression with your whole year, and you see different years for other events that we do. For example, sometimes you can have BOBs, which are big organized parties, I think that's what it stands for. And that's also, you can get to see people from different years, but just generally, I think everyone's just really friendly, and it just has a really lovely atmosphere. So I'd just say that's something that's quite lovely about Somerville.
Yeah, everyone says that. Everyone always says Somerville apart, and everyone's like, the atmosphere. As Ed sort of said, I've been told to say AV. AV is very good at Somerville by the AV man, but also the ENTS. Well, so I'm also kind of involved in the ENTS team, so that's sort of big organized parties, as Sarah said. And I've been like, from speaking to lots of other people at different colleges, they say they really don't enjoy their pops, but us, I think we do them well. That, you know, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I like to think that, you know, we have fun kind of as a community. And yeah, I'd say that there's a big emphasis on community, and it's not claustrophobically small as a college, and it's not overwhelmingly large. Like, I spent the summer at Keble, and Keble is gorgeous, but absolutely terrifyingly huge. So yeah, you know, it's a toss up about what you want. I really value community, so it was really good for me to have a college like Somerville.
So I mean, this is quite a hard one to answer, but I suppose one thing this is a bit of a niche. One thing I really appreciate about Somerville is the library. It's a lot better than other colleges' libraries because they have so many books. Because it used to be a women's college, and women weren't traditionally allowed in the like main Oxford libraries. So it's very large. It's got lots of space, lots of books. I think it's normally open 24/7, which would have been really helpful. Though I think because of COVID, they didn't have that. So if I'm honest, I'd say for me, that's one thing that does set Somerville apart is the library.
Yeah.
The next question is, are there many societies at Somerville, and what clubs are you involved in? I would say there's generally like a variety of societies available, whether it's that you're into music, or you're into sports, and then, or also with regards to rowing, that's like a popular one across Oxford generally. I myself am part of the netball team. I didn't get to play as much in first year because with COVID, but hopefully next year I get to play a bit more. So that's one society I'm involved in.
I think that there is a big emphasis on sport at Somerville. It's because it's smaller. A lot of so like I'm really into theatre, and it doesn't have a theatre society, which is sad. But apart from that, like everything, it has quite a lot of like weird niche societies which are fun, like knitting sock and baking sock. And one of my favourites actually is Oxford FemSoc. So it's for women and non-binary identifying people to kind of come together and discuss different issues, and there's snacks, and there's sort of just like really interesting opinions, and like people from all over the college and people that I don't necessarily know very well, like coming together and kind of discussing one of my favorite topics in the universe. So there's that, and there's also obviously opportunities to get involved with like central Oxford societies as well. So if like me, you've got something that isn't offered at Somerville, it's very easy to find it somewhere else.
So out of the Somerville specific societies, I'd say they're either generally tend to be sports societies. So like I do rowing. Then you've got like the sort of like performing, like creative ones. Like basically I'd say Somerville's main one in that regards is the music society, which is very active. It's quite a good music society. And then like there are just sort of like the sort of random ones. Like I do board game society, which is actually very fun. During the summer term, Trinity, we like would play board games in the quad, and it was very good. I think that's a great society actually. Yes.
How do you go to clubs and societies at other colleges? How much time do you spend in other colleges? Would you spend most of your time in Somerville? So it really depends on the society. So I didn't know this, but like Somerville Choir is open to anyone who's not at Somerville. So it's up to the society whether they want to open themselves up to other people. But there are basically, for any activity you can think of, there's going to be a centralized Oxford society. So like we've got Somerville Boat Club, but then there's the centralized Oxford Boat Club, which is takes itself a lot more seriously. And similarly, there's OUDS, which is the University Drama Society, etc., etc. So even if you can't find like something at a different college. There will be something at the university. And in terms of how much time you spend at other colleges, obviously that's been limited this year. But I, as a PPEist, I have tutorials at Trinity next year, which is going to be fun because I've never been to Trinity. And like I said, I spent the summer at Keble through a kind of AUDS play. So it really depends, like, how much you get involved with like the centralized Oxford stuff. And there might be someone from Keble who's running a project and they want you to come to Keble, or there might be, you know, whatever. It's more of a sort of, if you want to get involved with that stuff, then you can, but it's not like you're forced to. Yeah. And it's been pretty limited this year, obviously. Obviously because of COVID. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you can go to some clubs and societies at other colleges. I don't really know much about other colleges, societies. Yeah. I don't do any. I think some might be college only. Like I think the Somerville Math Society might have to be at Somerville, though I'm not even sure about that. But like there are, if you want to go to societies outside college, you'd normally go to the uni-wide ones, where there are basically something for, there's just so many. And you could, I think you can also, even if you want, go to the Oxford Brookes uni societies, though I don't know about that, but I would assume so. Yeah, I think other people covered how much time. Yeah, you just, this year you couldn't really visit other colleges. A lot of them had like, you had to be in the college to go in because of COVID, obviously, so can't really answer that.
Yeah, I would just agree with Leah and Dominic. With regards to COVID, you didn't spend that much time, but also normally if you have friends in other colleges, most of the time if you're a student and you know someone from that college, you can usually enter that college and just see around, even if it's not for a club or society. So yeah. The next question is, how good is the work-life balance at Oxford? An important question. I think it's essentially what you make it. Like you will get a set amount of work, right? And that depends on subject as well. And that might vary week to week. But it's then about how you balance your time, really. If you set yourself like timetables that you stick to it and just, for example, say I'm spending 2 hours on this piece of work to get it done, then you will have some free time left to do activities, to do clubs and get involved in other stuff. So I think it's very much down to time management, because you will have work, but it won't be that you have to spend 24/7 in your room. That's how much work you have. You should be able to do your work and then take the afternoon off sometimes, spend time with friends. And like I said, the type of work can vary. And sometimes some weeks might be a bit busier than others. So that is normal. But essentially, you shouldn't be 24/7 in your room. It is definitely possible to have a good work-life balance.
Yeah. At the beginning of the year, Steve Rayner, who's the sort of senior tutor, he said to us we should be working between 40 and 48 hours a week. I'm not sure if I ever worked 40 hours a week, but I tried. Every week I tried. I did actually in first week. And the reason I did in first week was because I timetabled everything out and I kind of wrote everything out in a little spreadsheet. I think it depends on what kind of person you are. Like PPE, it's quite tricky because you do have a set amount of work, but you can throw everything into it and produce an amazing piece of work, or you can kind of, not produce an amazing piece of work. Like you can sort of get away with doing varying amounts of work, which is tricky for me because I become complacent. But generally I'd say I was doing sort of 30 hours a week. And that's in first year and like not in exam season. But generally, because everyone has been where you have been, like a lot of your professors study at Oxford, and a lot of the people in your society, like all the people in your societies will study at Oxford, like they are very accommodating and understanding. And if you say, I can't come to rehearsal, or I haven't got this essay, like I'm sorry, this essay has been rushed and I've only got it half done or whatever, they want you to do well, but they're understanding. So it's not like you'll be kicked out if you just don't submit time.
I think the work-life balance is surprisingly okay. I mean, people make it out to be a lot worse than it is. Really, for something like maths, you'd be surprised how much free time you have. I think the most important thing is to work consistently. So try and get something done every day, really. I mean, obviously, like maybe you could have weekends off or whatever, but you have to like keep on going at it. Otherwise, it will build up. And basically, if you keep on top of it, you're going to be fine. I think also you have to have a good work environment. So if you're good at work in your room, by all means do. And I mean, you guys should know this because of working from home with your A levels. But like, if you need to like work in a library or something, like there are so many library slots. You just go. It will save you so much time. I think so. How my course is structured is I have like problem sheets, and I probably have like 3 days each week where I have to submit probably like 2 problem sheets. So it's not like I have any like massive essay rushes. So that means that I have to it's a lot easier to well, I don't ever have to really do any all-nighters, which I do think makes time management easier than let's say PPE. But I mean, I think it does just emphasize how if you just do a bit like all the time, you'll be fine.
The next question is, how did you choose your course and do you enjoy it? So obviously, this will differ depending on what course you chose. So for me, in terms of choosing medicine at Oxford, I think it's quite distinctive from other medical courses, especially because we have this traditional course structure where it's divided into preclinical and where you focus more on disciplines that teach the science behind medicine. And then after that is more clinical orientated for the last 3 years. And for me, I just wanted to have like this good understanding of important scientific principles behind medicine for me to like build up my clinical knowledge upon. So essentially that was like what really encouraged me to apply for this course. And then also as part of your 3rd year, you can also do research in terms of like a lab. So I'm quite interested in that. And that really was my main reason.
I'd say so. I was. Oh,
sorry.
Are you sorry? Are you done, Sarah?
Oh, yeah. You can go.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, so I was picking between theoretical physics and PPE, and I chose PPE because I basically like went onto people's like the uni sort of module lists, and I looked at like Southampton and Exeter and Oxford and loads of other places, and kind of read down their sort of optional modules, and they were just like mad things like kind of the politics of transnational space and stuff. And as soon as I like read these module titles, my whole brain was like, whoa, and started asking like loads of questions. And I remember sitting in a PPE like open day thing, much like this actually, at Oxford. And this is the nerdiest thing ever. I put my hand up. I was like, can I go to lectures of modules that I'm not studying? Because they all sound so interesting. And I kind of knew that like if I was going to spend 3 years doing 40 hours a week, it may as well be in something where like it just kind of gets your brain going. So yeah, that's how I picked, and that's kind of really vague, but yeah, I definitely say look at some module lists, because sometimes people get here with they don't get here, but like they get to uni with like an idea of what their course is going to be, and it's completely different. So yeah, I'd say read some module lists.
So I basically did the opposite of Leah, if I'm honest. So I sort of just picked maths because I was unimaginative and I couldn't really think of any subject that I liked more than maths. And I really liked maths quite a bit, and I thought I wanted to go to uni. And so I just picked maths and just sort of ended up doing it. So I really enjoy my course like a lot. First term was quite hard. It was like a big shock. But second term, I sort of adjusted so much, and I'm so excited for next year. So I am like mega pleased with how I did. So I did look at some course lists and stuff, but I kind of didn't really know enough maths to be able to tell the difference between what unis offered. I think if you if you're just doing A-level maths and like you don't know much maths beyond the curriculum, it could be like the same for a lot of people. Like with a lot of these STEM stuff, like the course lists will just be like words that you don't understand because it'll just be like the name of the object that you're studying, and it's like, so let's say, I don't know, the course is like quantum theory. Well, like if you just left school, you're not going to know really what that will entail. So it's sort of quite hard to tell what you're getting yourself into. But I do think the great thing about the Oxford Maths course is there are an insane number of options. I know friends at other unis who basically they're in third year and they haven't really got much choice. They're sort of being forced to take courses that they're not really that keen on. And I know I'm going to have totally the opposite problem. So the thing about Oxford is, even if you don't really know what the course is going to be, like there'll still be options that you are going to love just because there are so many.
Amazing.
Seeing from the list and oh, sorry.
Sorry, I think that's a bit. Sarah, do you want to go?
To the welfare one.
Oh yeah. So the next question from the list is, what's the welfare support like at Somerville? Leah and Dominic can give a bit more info about that. But one thing that I quite like about Somerville, and I think other colleges in Oxford have that as well, is peer supporters. So that's when just like fellow, like you, for example, could just get trained and essentially gain that qualification of being a peer supporter. And you just, if anyone has a problem, and I think it's just something more approachable because it's people of your like similar age, and it just feels a bit more comfortable talking to people who might also relate to some problems you have. For example, if you're feeling stressed, just to talk to someone. So that's peer support is quite a nice concept.
Yeah, I mean, I know quite a few of the peer supporters like in a friendship capacity, and I do find myself like venting to them because they're very good at that. They're very good at listening, and they're just like students who have had, I think, 24 hours training, and that's over like 8 weeks, and it's quite like rigorous. And we also have welfare officers who are like elected representatives who are generally peer support trained, and they kind of host welfare teas for people. I don't think I've skipped a single welfare tea where they give you free snacks and you can just come down and like have a chat with people who are like in similar positions to you. Like the one before exam week was nuts because everyone was just down there like just detoxing basically from studying. It's just in itself, it's just a nice kind of space to be in. And then we've also, I think, got professional help. I think we've got Dave and Joe, who are both professionals who are like employed to support you in a welfare capacity. And that includes like disability stuff, like if you need a specific room for your disability, and that's just through domestic that I know that, or if you have specific requirements because you've got ADHD or autism or whatever, you speak to Joe. So yeah, there's a big kind of community of people to support you, and there's other JCR officers who can support you in other ways. So like we've got Charlotte, who's our amazing disabilities officer. So if it's kind of a mental health thing regarding disability, then you can talk to her, whatever it is. Like there's a big team of people who try really hard.
Also, there's also uni-wide help. So there's the counselling service, and there's also DAS, the Disability Advisory Service, and you can get support through both. So basically DAS, if you like have a disability and you apply to Oxford, and I'd say it's a good job to get in contact with them early, i.e. maybe like March or April. You wouldn't want to like leave it until like September. But because I suppose if you want to apply for like funding for something, that would take time. So I would recommend getting in contact with DAS if you need to, not leaving it last minute. And I suppose do get in contact with them if there's like something you need support with. Yeah. So
the final question is, what's been the highlight of your time at Somerville so far? Ooh, that's a difficult one. I think just something that was just so unique to me was matriculation day, because that's just a unique experience. So matriculation is essentially a day where you're welcomed into the university officially, and you dress up in formal attire known as a subfusk. And you take part in a ceremony where they just essentially admit you as a member of the university. And it's just such a unique thing to Oxford. But what I also loved is that on that day we were taking pictures in Somerville, so you also got to see a lot of the people in your year. And it was just really lovely seeing everyone dressed up. You really feel like you're part of a community. So I would say that was a really nice time.
Yeah, I'd have to say sometime early in the year as well. I'd say, I think on the first, it's not like everything went downhill from here. The first night we sat, Somerville like supplied us pizzas for free. So so they gave us like free food and they accommodated us. And obviously like everyone had such a mad journey. They've been wearing masks all day, like everyone was exhausted. And we just came and sat on the landing in our corridor, like the 10 of us who were living together, and just like chatted and ate, and then we like, you know, went for a walk and stuff, because that was the highlight of 2020 friendship. I was going for a walk. But yeah, it was just, I don't know, it was like the first instance of like the whole community coming together and people I'd kind of spoken to online, actually meeting them in person. It'd be amazing. And it was kind of, I don't know, there's something about Somerville, I think partly because it's a ring and a quad, like everyone feels like they're kind of facing inwards and it's like a big circle of people, figuratively. Like it's a kind of, it's a community of people, and I feel like I felt that most strongly on that first night.
So I probably would have said matriculation. So I'll say, so there was, so this is from Trinity, there was the freshers dinner. And it was sort of the first time we got to dress up and sort of like sit in. Well, this was the temporary dining hall. So basically it was like a gigantic porter cabin. But it was, so like we all dressed up, and unlike normal formals, this one, like they supply you with like free alcohol and stuff. And it was very fun. And then everyone went to the college bar after and just sat and chatted, and it was just a really great night. So that also, I'd say just generally, just walking around Oxford at like 11 p.m, 12 p.m. is just like really fun, and I would recommend. And that's been like the highlight of a lot of my days. And I probably wouldn't do that so much next year when like stuff's open again. But I mean, it's just really fun and enjoyable, and I do think it's like something that I suppose everyone, I was just saying random words now.
Thank you. Thanks so much, guys, for like tuning in, and hopefully we'll see you guys kind of, you know, I think interviews are online this year, but visit days or, you know, whatever, and maybe hopefully see you next October.
Yeah. See you guys. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining me today. This is a question and answer session about medicine. So I don't know whether you know already, but the structure of the course in Oxford is a 6-year course for the undergraduate course, and the first 3 years is preclinical, which are predominantly science and classroom based, and then the second 3 years is clinical, and I look after the clinical part of the course here at Somerville. I work as a GP and as a researcher in addition to my work here at Somerville, but I'm very involved in the admissions part of for the whole of the course, so I can talk lots about admissions as well. So please do ask lots of questions. Let me have a look at the first question. Hi, I'll be a medicine reapplicant. I obtained an interview last year and was rejected afterwards. I was wondering if I would be treated any differently to other applicants, either in terms of having to obtain more competitive BMAT scores or at interview. No, we won't know. To be honest, it will be done. It's done entirely. The BMAT and the GCSE scores are done entirely by an algorithm, so we won't know about that. And so you may have better GCSE scores or better BMAT or what have you, and so that will make a difference. The only way it would make a difference is at interview. And I can imagine that it would probably be in your interests to apply to a different college as your first choice college, just because the college might say, it's more likely to give you a shot at a different college rather than interviewing at the same college. I did my undergraduate at Cambridge, and I applied before my A-levels and didn't get in, and I was bloody minded and decided to apply again, and I got in second time round. And obviously we don't want you to go to Cambridge, we want you to go to Oxford, because obviously I now think the course is better here, but just to give you hope that it's not that some people do get in second time round. So absolutely, we wouldn't treat you any differently. Question 2, I have struggled to find relevant work experience during the pandemic and have only engaged with 1 or 2 online placements at GPs and a hospice and some other non-healthcare volunteering. Will this impact my application? I'm so glad that you've asked this. Thank you very much. This is a really great question. So the reason that we like people to have done work experience is several-fold, really. It's first of all to know that you know what you're letting yourself in for. So we like you to have done something where you've had exposure to a healthcare setting so that you know a little bit about what it's like to be a doctor. And that may be through an observer role, or it may be something that could be done online, but it could also be through books or talking to people. It doesn't necessarily have to be a kind of traditional work experience-based placement, and that's been particularly difficult during the pandemic. The second reason is that it's an opportunity for you to demonstrate that you have some of those skills that are really important for being a doctor. So to show that you have the ability to communicate, the ability to change your speaking style to who you're speaking to, you can show empathy and be compassionate, and those sorts of skills, which we do assess at the interview, but which are hard to assess in a short amount of time. And so by doing work experience, it gives an opportunity to show that you can demonstrate those things. And that's something which you can do online or virtually. So for example, telephone support of people, and a lot of people now are doing entirely virtual work experience, and that's totally fine. We know that that's been the situation. And I actually shared with Nuala before this something produced by the Medical Schools Council about getting work experience, and it's got some good links there for online work experience that you can do, as well as volunteering work that you can do. So absolutely, it's it already sounds like you've done plenty. So that sounds great, and it doesn't necessarily sound like you need to do any more, but for people that are still looking for stuff, have a look at those links. What I would say is that when it comes to writing your personal statement, rather than just listing what you've done, try to show what you've gained from it. So try to say, I did this during the pandemic, I was responsible for making phone calls to vulnerable people or to people in a care home who weren't able to have visitors. And during this time, I realised how isolating it is to have a long-term health condition, which means that somebody can't get out, and how important social contact is with people, how important social contact is. And I had to adjust how I was speaking for people who had learning disabilities. And that was useful for me because I practiced adjusting my communication manner to people of different cultures and backgrounds. So basically kind of taking what you've learned for it and saying how that will contribute to you making a good doctor. So particularly, for example, having a look at the GMC good medical practice guidance and having a look at, you know, for example, has something that's come up during your work experience made you think about that and made you reflect on it? And so writing about things like that can be great as well. But absolutely, we, you know, this time I think we're very much going to have the expectation that most people's work experience is going to be entirely virtual. And something else to really emphasize with that as well is that we know that different people have different opportunities in relation to getting work experience. So some people will be the son of a cardiologist and will be able to get oodles of work experience in lots of specialties because of who their dad knows, and we really don't want that to be. And other people will have nobody in the family, you know, they might be the first person in their family to go to university and have absolutely no contacts, and that difference absolutely should not make any difference to whether you can have a place, you know, whether you come here. And so we very much take into account that different people have different exposures and different opportunities. So it's about making the most of the opportunities that are available to you and gaining and showing what you've learnt, what you've learned from that. I hope that answers the question. Question 3, how much does the BMAT count, especially for graduate entry medicine? So it's actually an easier question to answer for undergraduates. So for the standard undergraduate course, the 6-year course, as I said before, it's an algorithm based on your GCSE score, or equivalent if you've done an alternative, plus your BMAT score, and that basically divides people into a list ranked. And so at the top of the list, there's a certain number of people who are definitely, let's invite those people for interview. And then at the bottom, and then the rest of the list is people who by that score wouldn't be invited for interview. But there's a certain number of places which, you know, should go to the people who are the sort of next score down, but we then have the potential to move people up if, for example, they have had a reason that they didn't do as well in their GCSEs as possible, or that there was something on the day of the BMAT that happened, you know, a family bereavement or something like that. And so we have the ability to look at the applications, and we do go through the applications in quite a lot of detail, checking that there's no reason that somebody should not do as well as that score suggests. And I should say also that that score is contextualized on the basis of the school and what you'd expect the GCSEs to be from that school. And then once you are invited for interview, everybody is essentially on a level playing field, and we don't actually see your BMAT scores at the time of the interview. So in terms of, and at that stage, it makes not very much difference, and we've taken people with all different BMAT scores. It might make a difference if we were deciding between 2 people and one had a fantastic BMAT score and one didn't. We might then be more likely to say, well, let's go with the person with the fantastic BMAT score. But actually at that stage, it doesn't really make a difference. For graduate entry medicine, it's much less formulaic, I suppose. In that we put a lot more, there's a lot more based on the application. So when you submit your application for graduate entry medicine, there is a special form for Oxford in addition to the UCAS form, and I think that will be the case again this year. And for that, you fill it, we then, everybody that's involved in admissions gets applications to just score, and we give you a score which is based on 3 things, but with a, you know, again, it doesn't need to be exact, based on academic skills, you know, academic successes. So kind of what degree you've done, how, you know, what it is. You know, if you've got a first and come top in the year, obviously you'll score more highly than somebody that's got a 2-2, and we don't really look at A-level. We don't really look at stuff before the degree. So although you put your A-levels down, we don't really care about what the results were from those. because we're aware that some people are late bloomers, and that's one of the advantages of graduate entry, medicine. So one is academic ability. Another one is commitment to medicine, which is things like work experience and what you've gained from it, and talking about being a doctor. And then the third one is sort of ability for independent working. So what examples you've got in your application that you can work independently, because particularly in the graduate entry medicine course, where you're doing all the site, you're essentially doing the first 2 years of the preclinical course compressed into 1 year. So there's a lot of work, and you do need to be able to work quite independently, and we look for evidence of that. So particularly in things like dissertations or projects, you know, if you've done a third year project during your degree, you know, how much kind of ownership you've had over that, and how much you've led it, and that's something that we look for in the references, as well as in your personal statement. So the personal statement and references are really important for graduate entry medicine. And then the score kind of comes out at the end of that, and there'll be some people then who will have scored really highly and will get an interview regardless of the BMAT score. There'll be some people who, I mean, to be honest, you know, if we say from the form that somebody should get an interview, then it doesn't really matter what your BMAT score is, you would still get an interview. But then there'll be a group of people where whether you would get in, you know, in that sort of borderline again, where it would depend much more on the BMAT score. So if you've done very well in the BMAT, the combination will get you an interview. So it is very important for graduate entry medicine, but I suppose it's just a little bit less formulaic in that if you've got a very good application, that's probably going to get you an interview anyway, regardless of your BMAT. Question 4: does Somerville College offer any scholarships or financial support for students, particularly for medicine? So I'm not going to give a sort of straightforward answer on this, because it changes all the time what support, what the options are, and so the scholarships and funding officer will be able to give you a lot more information on what the specifics of that are. There are specific ones for medicine. So there's something called the medical fund scholarships, which are available for clinical students, and they go to people who've performed excellently. So that they're not something that you apply to before you come, they're something that you apply for once you're here. So if you've done well academically, that's something that you can get. And I think, well, at the moment that's £1,000 a year. There is also help with elective. So in the final year, you get to do a medical elective, which is where you can go and practice somewhere else around the world. And I think there's £1,000 which can go towards that, and also travel for conferences. And then separately, there's a book and equipment grant, which can cover things like the cost of stethoscopes. But what I don't want to do is sort of say this is definitely what will happen, because it changes all the time. So yes, there are specific things for medicine, and there are also hardship things in general, which are across all subjects. So, you know, we really feel like, I mean, for undergraduate medicine, we really feel that your financial situation should not make a difference to your ability to come and study medicine at Oxford or indeed anywhere. For graduate entry medicine, that's not quite the case, and we do need to make sure that you have the ability to pay for the course before you come. So that's more, you know, that is more relevant there. But then again, some of those funds are available to graduate entry medics as well. Question 5: when you ask the science problem-solving questions in the interview, how would you best like a candidate to approach them? To be honest, we really want you to be yourself, and being yourself at interview is really important, because it's not just about us liking you, it's about you liking us. And if you're kind of pretending to be somebody that you're not, you don't want to have to keep that going for the whole duration of the course, because that's going to be quite a long time. That the purpose of those questions is to see how you're working through something and seeing how you think. So I would encourage you to talk through your thought processes, and sort of, rather than just sort of straight away coming out with an answer saying, oh, well, if this is this, then that could be this. And, you know, because that then, if you're talking through your thinking process, that will help the tutors to help you work out the answer. So if you've gone wrong somewhere with the logical thought process, it means we can say, oh yes, you did say that, and if that were the case, that would happen, but actually that isn't the case, this happens. Now that you know that, how would you change your answer? So it's sort of a two-way discussion to help you get to the right answer. And I think that two-way discussion and asking questions rather than just necessarily spurting out the first thing in your head, I think is good. And asking if you don't understand something. But I think being yourself and talking through the problem solving, the way that you're problem solving, I think is probably the best thing to do. Question 6, how close is the accommodation to the lecture halls, labs and the hospital during the medicine course? Good question. So Somerville is in a lovely location in Oxford. It's in Jericho, which is in the centre, but in the north of the centre, in an area which is greener than the centre of town. So we have a bit more space, and we're very close to Port Meadow and the university parks. I've just come back from a run around the university parks before doing this, actually. And it's very close to where the undergraduate lectures are. So that's all done in the Medical Sciences Teaching Centre, which is on the South Parks Road Science part. So that's where all the all the clever science research that's taking place in the basic sciences in the university is, and that's on the edge of the university parks. And there's now a specific teaching centre just for medicine, and that's, I guess, 15 minutes walk or 5 minute cycle from here. And for most of the undergraduate course, that's where you'd be being, and then most tutorials will either be in college or in people's labs within the South Parks Road teaching side. For the hospital, and with regards to accommodation, we have the potential for all undergraduates to live in for the first 3 years of the course. So you can live in college if you wish to, and I think most people do choose to. Then for the clinical part of the course, that's more like a kind of real job in that you have to wear smart clothes and you have to be in for 8:30 in the morning and things like that. And most people will live out at that stage, and people often will choose to live up in Headington, which is where the hospitals are, partly just because if you don't, the hill is a bit of a killer on a bike first thing in the morning. So a lot of the medical students will choose to live up the hill in Headington, so that they're close to the hospital. From college up to the hospitals, it's 25-minute cycle ride, including a hill. But as I say, that's actually something that the students don't really have to do, because they generally will live in Headington, which is between the two sites. And then as part of the clinical course, there are also district general hospital rotations, which are out at Northampton, Milton Keynes, Swindon, Reading, High Wycombe and Stoke Mandeville. And although there's a sort of groan associated with them because they're outside of Oxford and stuff going on in Oxford, actually they're incredibly valuable teaching experiences, because you're living in the hospital accommodation, and the hospitals aren't nearly so inundated with students. So it's really good that the doctors there are often really keen to teach. The patients aren't so used to seeing students, and it's really nice for and it's a really nice opportunity, and actually most people do have a very, very nice time out at district general hospitals. Question 7, who are the medicine tutors at Somerville? There are lots of us. The way that, as I say, the course is divided into preclinical and clinical. So for the preclinical part of the course, there's three fellows in medicine. So that's Damien Tyler, Robin Clem and Daniel Anthony. And they do some of the teaching for the first preclinical 3 years, but we also have a larger team. And so I should say, and then I'm the Janet Vaughan tutor in clinical medicine, so I'm the tutor for the second 3 years. And I look after the second half of the course. But then between us, we have a large team of other people who are lecturers who deliver the teaching and are affiliated to Somerville, but kind of don't have a permanent post here. And that's really nice, because they're often doing research in that, they're often postdocs or PhD students who are doing research in the area that you're having the tutorial in. So they'll often be able to give a more up-to-date information on it, and it feels very cutting edge, the research that you're getting, but at the same time you kind of have the long term getting to know somebody over a long period of time. And for clinical we do it similarly, so there's a few of us that deliver quite a lot of history and examination tutorials and kind of clinical reasoning, clinical problem solving through years 4, 5 and 6. But then we have a team of about 20 now tutors who are across the specialties, so in all different medical and surgical specialties. And that means that, for example, you know, when you're doing obstetrics and gynecology, we've got a tutor that can give you tutorials in that. And so you again get the longitudinal, us getting to know you and seeing you develop over a period of time, and that part of it. But then you also have the you know, being taught by a specialist in that field, which is a really nice combination, and I think it works really well. Question 8. How do tutorials work? Will they all be in college, or do you move about between tutors and colleges? So tutorials are really a collegiate entity. You know, it would be pretty unusual to have tutorials with someone from another college. You know, the year group is often split. You know, the year group would often be split into 2 so that you can have the tutorials in smaller groups, because there's a lot of, you know, as I was saying about interviews and the sort of back and forth conversation, there is a lot of back and forth conversation in tutorials, and that's easier with a small group. So we tend not to mix colleges. And tutorials, some of them are in college because they're done by people who often run a lab in the science departments. I think they often will tend to hold their tutorials. Well, it varies. Some of them will hold them in college in a teaching room like this one in college, but some of them will have them in their lab, which means you get to go and see them in their lab, and you know, see people pipetting and things, which is fun as well, just because that's more convenient for them, in that they then don't have to travel. For the clinical part of the course, the tutorials are a mix of kind of classroom-based tutorials, some of which are in college, but predominantly bedside, where you go around and see patients in the hospital and talk about them and say, you know, this is, you know, Janet, she's come in with breathlessness, and talk to her about her breathlessness, and then someone has a go at doing an examination, and then other people get to have a listen as well. We've also got this is, I don't know if you can see her. This is a mannequin that we got during we got her during COVID, because of not being able to examine patients so easily, and so she can do heart sounds, and we can heart sounds and examinations on her, which is good fun as well. So we do that in clinical tutorials, and there's also a room that medical students can use in college called the Bannister Room, and that has a proper skeleton in, so that's really useful for anatomy, and it's got computers and lots of textbooks and things like that. So I think the students will work there a lot. So they're kind of all over. Some tutors, particularly the lecturers, will sometimes be attached to another college or do tutorials for several colleges, but generally the ones that they will do for Somerville will just be Somerville students. And then those are the tutorials, but then you'll mix with other students, both at the lectures and at the sort of seminars and the practical skills sessions. So you'll get to mix with other colleges there. That said, you know, there are, you know, post-COVID benefits. There are you know, I think some people have found it very convenient being able to do tutorials over Teams. Particularly, it's meant that, for example, students who are based out at district general hospitals in the clinical years could join a tutorial that they wouldn't otherwise be able to. And so I think we are likely to stick with Teams tutorials for some things. And I think, you know, lectures have gone online, and I think students have really liked the format of being able to do a lecture in their own time when they feel like it. And so it may well be that the kind of days of going to a lecture theatre for your lecture have gone, and that will be more a sort of do it in your own time, with the lecturer having done a pre-recorded lecture or what have you. Question 9, I would like to know if it is guaranteed to promote from preclinical to clinical year when you pass all the exams in medicine, i.e. there is no decrease in quota for clinical years intake. Does it also apply to international students? Excellent question. So yes, you, assuming you pass all the exams, you're absolutely guaranteed to go on to the clinical year, and also guaranteed to stay at Somerville if you wish. So what this question refers to, which some people might not know, is that because the courses traditionally were quite separate, and you get a degree, a BA at the end of the first 3 years before you then go to the second 3 years. And in the olden days, the way it used to work is that almost everybody, because there wasn't a clinical course in Oxford, everybody would then go from Oxford, would leave after the first 3 years and go to London. And then over the last 100 years, we now have established a very, highly successful, in fact, I think #1 in the world ranked clinical course in Oxford. And so now it's pretty unusual. There is the possibility of applying to London, and the schools in London do still take people who've done the first 3 years in Oxford, but it's definitely the less common thing to do. And and they can also be moving around between colleges, so some students might move to postgraduate colleges within Oxford, but actually the last 5 years or so, most people have tended to stay at Somerville, which has been really nice, because we've got a really good relationship between the preclinical students and the clinical students, and it's a really kind of nice medical family. And so most people have some have kind of gone off and done PhDs and things like that, and haven't necessarily gone through in the standard way, but yes, they, if you've passed all your exams, absolutely, we very much want you to stay at Somerville, and that you will get a place at the Oxford Medical School. And that's exactly the same for international students, again, assuming that you've fulfilled the criteria on your visa and all this sort of stuff that I don't really get involved in, but assuming you've ticked all the necessary boxes, there's no, on academic grounds, there's no sort of, oh, you've not done well enough in your exams, you can't stay on it. There's absolutely nothing like that. But that did used to be the case in the past, which may be where you've heard something about that from, but now that's not the case. Question 10, what advice would you give regarding the personal statement? So being completely frank, for Oxford undergraduates, and that's not the case for graduate entry medicine, where there's quite a lot of emphasis on your personal statement, particularly on the Oxford specific form, although we do read both of them for graduate entry medicine. The personal statement doesn't have a lot of emphasis, and so I would not just write it for Oxford. I would think about the other places that you're applying to as well, so don't kind of put all your eggs in one basket, because in all honesty, because of the way that we do the algorithm thing with the GCSE score and the BMAT, and that deciding whether you've got an interview, it doesn't make a great difference in terms of the selection. So we read the personal statements at 2 stages. One of them is at the point of that selection, and we're basically just reading them to look and see, is there any reason why you didn't do as well in your GCSEs or in your BMAT as you would have been expected to. So essentially looking for mitigating circumstances, as I mentioned before. So we're not really looking for good things, we're looking for any reason why you didn't do as well. So and similarly with your references. So again, if there is anything that would explain why you haven't, why you don't think you did as as well as you could have done, illness or family illness or what have you, definitely, put it in your personal statement, or make sure that your referees mention it, so that it does get taken into account. Then the second time that we read it is just before we call you in for interview. So by that stage, you've got the interview, and we're using it as, we tend to have a read of it, and there tend to be 2 interviews, a kind of more science-based problem-solving science questions, and then a more clinically orientated clinical problem solving and ethics and communication based interview. And for the clinical interview, we tend to read it and have a look at what work experience you've done, and ask you a kind of general question about your work experience, and so talk about that, and as I said before, showing what you've learned from it rather than just making it a list of what you've done. And similarly, I think in the science interview, you will use it as a springboard. So they might pick something off your personal statement and say, oh, that's interesting, that person's done research on malaria parasites for their A-level project. For their first question, we will ask them about malaria. And so if you get an interview, even more important than what you've put on your statement, it's also to know about the stuff that you've put there. So if you've put something about malaria on your personal statement, if you're going to say, know what malaria is and a little bit about the malaria life cycle, so that you can answer questions about it. So don't put anything down that you don't want to talk about. what are the advantages of prosection over dissection? So I think I'm right in saying that it's almost entirely prosection on the medical course now. So that's done in the first 3 years. And prosection is where the specimens for anatomy have been prepared already by somebody that knows what they're doing, whereas dissection is you doing it yourself, which is what I did when I trained. And yes, I mean, the advantage is just that it looks beautiful. Oh, fire alarm. The advantage is just that it looks beautiful. Stopped, must be okay. So that's, I guess the disadvantage is you learn less in the way of surgical skills, but to be honest, it's a bit early to be doing surgical skills, and I don't think you really, miss out on it. I think I learned far more from the prosection specimens that I learnt with than the dissection specimens, when I was an undergraduate. Question 12, I would like to know if there was guaranteed hospital placement, housemanship after the successful graduation from the medical school for an international student. Does it require any visa? So my understanding, and I would say double check this because this is based on my experience with our students, is that if you come over here to study medicine, you are guaranteed a visa until the end of your foundation program, I think. So you essentially, like, the student visa continues on. So I think the way it works is that you apply for a foundation program exactly the same as students, and absolutely, if you've passed all your exams, you are guaranteed a job somewhere in the country in the foundation program scheme. Exactly the same as with home students, and there's no difference in the way that you're treated in the application process. I understand, I've never come across any of our international students. We usually have at any one time we usually have a few international students have any issues with getting house jobs, but I think it is then at the end of your F2 job that's when you have to do something with a visa in order to stay. But obviously on a kind of, we really want people to come and work in the NHS and train in the NHS, and so I don't think I think as long as you go through the required steps, I don't think there's any issues of people being sent home if you filled in all the paperwork that you need to. So that's the last question. Thank you very much for listening, and I really hope that you decide to apply for medicine and that you choose Somerville. Thank you very much. Bye.
Hi everyone, my name is Ayla Barichu and I'm the lecturer for psychology at Somerville College, and I'm here to answer some of your questions, and I believe we have our first question already. So first question is, will I be disadvantaged during my application or on the course if I haven't studied any science subjects before? I can still see on the website it says recommended but not essential. Yes, so as the website suggests, we recommend that students do science because there is a significant component of science in the course, particularly if you're doing experimental psychology. So you are expected to do behavioral neuroscience. However, we don't. It is not essential because we cover all the necessary fundamentals that you need. So everything will be covered, but by all means, having a bit of maths background or having a little bit of science understanding does help. So yes, it's not essential. Next question. Does the field work in the 3rd and 4th years involve work experience as a psychologist, or is it engaging with research? So field work, there is, in 3rd year, or at least at an undergrad level, from my understanding, actually this question is a very good question to the department itself, who actually coordinate the entire course throughout the university. But at a 3rd year level, you are able to take research projects where working with specific researchers in fields that you're most interested in. And in there, you may be able to engage with patients, for example, in particular clinical scenarios. However, there is very little field work taking place on an undergraduate level. And that's primarily because we are talking about patients. And until you develop a certain level of background knowledge within a field, it will be very responsible and, to a degree, unethical for us to expose students or to patients and vice versa. So it's actually, it is the case to protect both sides, if that makes sense. Okay, so, and yes, at a fourth year level, then if you're doing a clinical master's, then you will be put in more clinical scenarios to gain experience in the field at a postgraduate level. Okay, so our next question. What are some interesting example research projects which psychology students have done recently? Oh, there's so many, and it really depends what you're interested in. So like there's different ways you can be engaged in research. So some students very early on participate in different or volunteer to be part of different research groups, which means that they're then able to gain research experience in the field of psychology. But throughout your studies as well, you do various different experiments throughout the studies that are set up by different researchers, and they range. So we have research topics in cognition, in social sciences, in neurosciences. So whichever your interest, wherever your interest lies, there's really something going on that you can engage in. And personally, I think they're all fascinating and interesting in their own ways. So yeah, so. Okay, so more specific about the tutorials, are you set problems or essays for tutorials? So the question is yes. So for each tutorial, you'll be set a task, and the task might include writing an essay, or you may be asked to prepare a presentation, or you may be able to ask to research a particular research article, to review it and critically evaluate it and prepare it for the tutorial. And it really depends on what the topic is. Or you may be asked to do some statistical problems. So for experimental psychology, you'll be asked to do psychology, neuroscience, and statistics as the three primary subjects, preliminary subjects, and you'll have different weekly exercises for each subject. Okay, next question. How many psychology graduates actually go into a career as a psychologist or therapist? Oh, that is an excellent question. It does vary, obviously, from year to year, but actually it's pretty much a minority, or less than 50%. Psychology is a very, very broad topic and leads to many career paths, and not everyone goes down the path of clinical psychology. And for various reasons, some students intend to do clinical psychology and then they get interested in other fields like organizational psychology or human resources, marketing. I've even had one of our students this year went on to do into the financial field. So she was interested in finance, and she was able to get into a postgraduate degree in finance. Then they were really interested in her psychology background. I must admit that is probably one of the most unusual, but it does happen. So there's so many career options at the end of a psychology degree. And yeah, and of course there's also teaching and academia and research. So a lot of people tend to go down that path as well. So when you put it all together, I'd say probably less than half of our students go on to do clinical therapy related work. Okay, the website says you have to do probability theory and statistics as a module, and this includes a lot of data handling and coding. Are you taught how to do that, and or expected to have those skills already? Okay, no, we definitely teach you that. So you don't expect, you do need to do a lot of statistics, because you really need to be able to understand data and all the research to be able to apply it clinically effectively. So it's a very important part. And also, a lot of behavioral abnormalities are on a spectrum. So in order for you to understand something is abnormal, you really need to have a good understanding what a normal range is, which is why you expect to do so much psychology, statistics, in psychology. It's a very important component. However, we do teach you everything. We teach you how to code it effectively, so from the very basics all the way through to the most advanced as you progress throughout the degree as well. So it's not essential that you know this coming into the degree. We do teach you what you need to know. Okay, so next question. I would like to know if international students are also qualified for the training of clinical psychology year 4 master's degree. Will there be any selection preferences between home students and international students? So my understanding that all students are eligible to apply, and you do, whether you get accepted depends on whether you meet the criteria for that particular clinical degree. However, you need to be very careful when applying for clinical degrees because not all countries will accept the registration or the qualification. So if you may come here and do a 4th-year clinical degree, but your home country, no matter where it is, might say that we don't recognize this degree, we need you to do a local translation or transfer or bridging degree in order to be do it. So this is sort of related to international laws, something you need to look up. But when you are able to apply, and to my understanding, there is no discrimination on whether you agree. But of course, there is also the issue of visa, and that's once again not to do with the selection process itself. Yeah. So next question. So does undergraduate experimental psychology involve working on animal research? So this is optional, it may. So in general, in that general undergraduate component where all students are expected to participate in, no, there is no animal-related research. However, you do get exposed to human brains, which is really awesome. So you get to actually handle a real human brain. And of course, these were donated by people. But then you get to actually experience it, some of the patients might have had a stroke and then their brains were able to be used for research and teaching. However, we don't do any animal research per se until 3rd year, where students can electively choose to be part of an animal research. However, this is by choice. And so there's no compulsory component to be involved. But nevertheless, you are expected to read a lot of research that's carried out on animals to be able to understand the behavioral or the neurological components of various behaviors. That is difficult to avoid. I would like to know if studying in A-levels, A-B with psychology as an elective more advantageous comparing students in other exam qualifications, which does not provide psychology as an elective. That is a good question. So if you have some understanding and background in psychology, of course, this is helpful, and it might actually better inform you if you want a career in psychology in itself. However, it is not essential. So once again, we go back and we teach all the fundamentals to all our students. We have students that come from very different backgrounds. Some of them have only done science and physics. Other students who are more interested in the sociology or history or have done all these, and they do have different skills. So the 1st year of psychology is about building the general skills that are necessary for psychology. Our prelim program, that's the idea, is to actually help everyone establish that baseline that we can move forward from itself. So of course there are some advantages because you might be familiar with some topics, but we actually go well beyond A level, even in prelims. So yeah, thank you. How has the pandemic affected your teaching and the application interview process? So unfortunately, the pandemic has had quite an impact, and the main difference is that our tutorials have been online. However, from my perspective at least, I don't think this has been a disadvantage because with current technology, we're able to have tutorials where people are able to present, engage, and interact. And I think in Oxford has the advantage that our tutorials are very small. When we have 2 or 3 people, being able to conduct a tutorial online is actually quite effective and relatively easy. And there have been some advantages as well, because now lectures have been available, like recordings of lectures have been available to students, and students have really, really found that advantageous as well. So there have been lots of cons and some pros as well in the process itself. And once again, the interviewing process has sort of gone online. And once again, there are advantages and disadvantages with being in one. We find that when the interviews are online, students tend to be more relaxed and able to be themselves, which that means that overall, I find that's a real positive thing for interviews. So yeah, so being able to relax and just be yourself sometimes can be very difficult when you're in person, but in interviews it's a little bit easier. However, at the same time, that limits the type of questions we can ask in an interview if we're online versus in person. So there are a few adjustments that way. But overall, I think sort of it kind of balances itself out. So yeah, it's a good question, though. Thank you. So the next question. At what level do you need to have a good chance at getting into undergraduate experiment? Okay, so to get into undergraduate experiment, okay, A levels. Okay, sorry, it's A levels. The question's about the A levels. So for A levels, you are expected to have A's at least to be able to get into psychology in particular subjects. So, and all the requirements are actually online. All the requirements are online for you to be able to do that. But you are expected to get A's within the A and A plus range to be able to get in A levels in experimental psychology. And but however, we do take also into account background. So it's really worth applying and talking to your school whether you should apply. And so we do look at disadvantage and where students are coming from, and we do adjust accordingly. And also the university has its own assessment as well, which comes into consideration. So we don't just look at A levels, we actually look at our own assessment, which is used to pre-select students. Okay, so it's not just about A levels. Okay. What modules do you study in psychology? So, like I said, psychology is a very broad subject and there are various subtopics. We divide the course into 3 primary subjects, one being statistics and probability, the second one being neurophysiology, and then psychology. But within each subject, there's various subdivisions. So we do, in psychology, we do a bit of social sciences, we do developmental, in prelims, we do social, developmental, cognition, a bit of neurophysiology as well, sort of at a more broader level to bring everyone onto par, and then we go on to more advanced levels of the various topics as well. So you pretty much end up, by the end, you end up covering the entire spectrum of psychology at prelim and a second year level. And then in the third year level, you get to choose which topics you want to advance in as well. So there is some selectivity. You don't have to do all the entire broad spectrum of psychology all the way through. By third year, there's a little bit of selection happening. Hope that answered your question. Okay, for the psychology masters in Oxford, it is including BA and psychology. Does it include BA and masters in psychology? Sorry, I'm not sure if I actually understand that particular question. So that will be a good question to direct, because it's about the master's program. That will be a good question to direct to the actual department itself. So, which are actually involved in coordinating, have more specifics about how the master's degrees are structured in itself. Is there, sorry, also the second part of the question, is there any selection to promote from year 3 BA to year 4? Does the intake student have a quota, and what is the selection criteria? Will there be any reference for home that international students? Okay, so going into a master's degree, so firstly, the most important, they will look at your grades. So there is a selection criteria there. You do need a certain degree to be able to go on to do masters. And yes, there are a certain amount of spaces. And for master's degree, you're not only competing with other Oxford students, but other candidates from other universities as well. So of course, they will look at home candidates who want to go on to do the masters itself. Also, depending on the type of masters you do, so example, for clinical masters, there are pre-requirements of field work. So you are expected to show some interest in clinical work. Maybe you have volunteered for charity that works with patients with various mental illnesses, or volunteer for hospitals or nursing homes with Alzheimer's patients. It doesn't matter, but there needs to be some, it doesn't matter which specific one volunteering you do, because some people do phone counselling, for example, in their spare time as students, but you do need to show some initiative that you are interested in clinical psychology and that you have actually engaged in the community to try and gain that experience. So pretty much you need to be able to demonstrate that you have a real interest and you explored the area and tried it out, and that's why you want to go into clinical psychology. So there are those kind of pre-requirements. You need to look them up. All these are listed. So it's important to actually look them up. If you're an undergraduate student that's interested in becoming a clinical psychologist, then it's something you need to look on and start building that part of your CV for fourth year. Hopefully that answered the second part of your question a little bit more accurately. Okay, so what sort of things do you expect a candidate to know, express in the psychology interview? Okay, so that is a very good question, and the response might be a little bit confusing. So we don't actually expect you to know anything beyond what is taught at a high school level and a general sense. Okay, so we do expect people to have sort of broad knowledge of the sciences. So I guess like prior to specialising, so there is some expectation of that, but we don't expect you to know anything specific. So about psychology per se, what we're interested in. So in interviews, may be presented with problems, and you may be asked to be able to see on what we're interested in, how you sort of think about how you sort of solve the problem and how you approach problems. Okay, so they're not necessarily right or wrong answers, but rather what we're interested in, how you approach and conceptualize, your ability to laterally think and conceptualize ideas, how you weigh ideas. So that's what we're actually more interested in. Okay, so the next one, how many years of study after an undergraduate degree does training to be a clinical psychologist take? So that really depends which path you take. So there are different ways of becoming a clinical psychologist. So after an undergraduate degree, you do need to do a master's, and the master's in clinical psychology can be, you can do 1 year degree or you can do a 2-year master's degree depending on the courses or different courses. And to be able to register, sometimes you can actually go on to do a field work, so work with a psychologist that will willing to supervise you as well. So there are different ways to do it, of actually achieving that goal, and it really depends on which type of psychology, how you wanna go down, in which path you want to go. But you do need at least masters before you can become a psychologist, follow up to become a psychologist. So who are the other Somerville psychology tutors, and do students have all their tutorials with Somerville tutors? Okay, so the Somerville tutors, so I'll for this year I will be the Somerville tutor for psychology. So we do have a different tutor from another college that comes in to teach statistics and neuroscience. So not all your tutors will be from Somerville College, particularly after prelim. So for prelim psychology, you will have the one tutor that sort of covers the entire, like the course. So I'll be doing psychology this year. We have a tutor for neurophysiology, another tutor for statistics, and you'll be having those tutors for the first 2 terms throughout your prelim. So by the time we get to Trinity term, then you start specialising in topics, and your tutors will actually be allocated by the department. So by the time we get to second year level, sort of the second part of psychology, you get highly specialised tutors from all over the university, so which means that you will be visiting a lot of other colleges for your tutorials. So it's only during the prelim that you do all your tutorials within your college, and after prelim, I mean, there's quite a bit of sort of walking around or going around different colleges and visiting, which I think is fantastic, because then you get to meet so many more people and get to interact with people with other colleges, not just within Somerville as well. Of course, Somerville is fantastic. It is, some people find it sad, but you know, so but it's a good experience that way. Okay, what sort of problems can be asked in an interview for psychology? Okay, so there's various different types of problems. I think the university has a fantastic guide on the interview, sort of gives you examples of how interviews might go. And I think these are fantastic guides. Also gives you examples of the type of questions you may be asked. So, for example, you may be asked, given a particular scenario and asked to say, well, if you're interested in Sophonol, how would you design that experiment? How would you test this? And sort of have a look at the different factors you'd consider while trying to construct the experiment itself. So another thing, you may be actually given a problem, like perhaps a graph that you may be able to ask to interpret to see what it means. So with all these problems, you don't necessarily need specific background knowledge on the topic, but you need to be able to work through the problem to solve it at that particular moment, per se. So yeah, there's various different ones. Oh, and also I know that this is very important. You maybe ask questions based on the background you provide. So you're actually all asked to do personal statements, and it's whatever you say, make sure you know what you're talking about in that statement. You actually understand, so you don't want to be caught out, because sometimes interviewers do read them and they'll ask you specific questions. So if you say, I actually studied the following topic, or I've been engaged in this area of research, they might ask you about that. So that's another thing. So they could ask questions based on your personal statements as well. Okay, so sorry, we have a couple more. How do PPL and PPE differ? How would you recommend choosing between them? Okay, so for PPL, so you'll be for experimental psychology is predominantly focused on psychology and neuroscience. So experimental psychology is a lot more sciencey. So if you love the science, if you love your chemistry, physics, biology, and statistics and mathematics, then that's definitely probably right for you. However, if you're coming from more philosophical background or interested in more humanities or linguistics or philosophy, then PPL is more appropriate for you. So PPL, psychology, philosophy, and linguistics. So when you're doing psychology as part of PPL, it's either coupled with linguistics or with philosophy. So that's the main difference. And you do much less neuroscience for PPL than you do for experimental psychology. So when coming to choosing between them, you really, however, with both courses, you can become a registered psychologist. There are ways. So that should not be something that sort of prevents you doing one or choose one over the other. You can become a registered psychologist with both branches. It really comes down to interest and what you're more passionate about. If you're more passionate about philosophy or linguistics, then definitely go PPL. If you're passionate more, really want to know about how the brain works and what happens in your head, then definitely that's EP is more for you. That's what I'd choose. Can you start at Oxford doing PPL and transition to just psychology later on? Okay, so it's not something we look favourably on. It is possible, but we don't advise it. And that's because the interview process for the two are different. And we do look for different skills for EP versus PPL. So it's very important that you apply. You will, for students that want to transit, in very, very rare cases, we may allow it, but we will re-interview you to see that you will be able to transfer from PPL to experimental psychology or vice versa. Okay, so it's not straightforward, easy switch, and it's not something we encourage. How many EP students do you accept into Somerville? So we only accept 4 EP students. Overall, throughout the entire, throughout the university, there are about between 60 and 80 students, I believe, they accept. And because across 30 colleges, well, not all colleges offer psychology, across the colleges is more accurate. And we accept 4 experimental psychology students and 2 PPL students with psychology and linguistics. So, yeah. The Oxford website says the structure of the PPL course is currently under review. Do you know how it might change? I actually am an EP tutor, so I would say no. So I do tutor the psychology component for PPL students for the course, but I'm not directly involved in the review process. However, I would expect that the core fundamentals will stay the same, meaning that overall you'll be doing the subject like linguistic philosophy is something you'll be able to do. And I believe the changes are more related to how much philosophy and linguistics you're able to, which electives you're able to do in each course, but please do not quote me on that one. That's a good one. Another good question for the department itself. I'm really interested in Charles Spencer's research into the senses. Is that something I could study as an undergrad? Yes, we do actually. We do multisensory. I'm actually very interested as well when I work with Charles Spencer myself on multisensory integration, not just about how we perceive the senses, but how we merge that information in sort of a unified percept. It's actually a very interesting topic. You do multisensory perception as part of the perception subtopic in part 1. So yes, you do get to study it. And then you can go on, if you like, you can go on, and Charles, I believe, is usually likes to tutor that topic for the Somerville students. So this year or next year, you might have him as a tutor for that particular subcomponent of the course itself. However, and then as part of your third year advanced option, you can choose projects related to multisensory perception and work with Charles as well. So yes. What's unique about studying psychology at Somerville? Question. Well, firstly, you have me as a tutor and Charles Spence as well. So overall, the subject itself is coordinated by the department. So all the students, irrespective of what which college you go to, the foundation and what you study is the same. So what changes is the tutors and the environment itself. So Somerville has one of the best equipped libraries out of all the colleges. Fantastic. It's got a great, it's a really nice, inclusive environment. And I find that our students are just happy. They're happy to be among themselves, and they're happy to interact with the environment. We have a very inclusive, like I say, environment where you can just be yourself, and very supportive as well. It has a great team of people here to support people at various levels, whether it be emotional or support, or maybe financial or career opportunity. There's a fantastic team of people at Somerville that really try and help you achieve your best and help you build a career at the end of your degree itself. So that's the unique part, I suppose. Yes. Final question. What do you think is the best thing? Oh, sorry, that was the final question. So, yes. That was a fantastic question. Thank you so much. A really good question. I really appreciate it. And hopefully I've been able to answer all of them. So, thank you so much and goodbye. Thanks. Bye.
Hello everybody, I'm Bobby. I am a music student and I'm just about to start my second year.
Hiya, I'm Lowry. I'm also second year and I'm studying ancient and modern history.
And hiya everybody, my name's Sam and I'm going into my second year as well, studying history and French at Somerville. Yeah. So we've got a first question, so we might as well kind of go straight into it. So I guess I'll read out the question, then we kind of go through it. Cool, guys? Yeah. So did you choose to apply to Somerville, and if so, why? And if not, why not? And would you choose it if you can make the decision again? So personally, I did choose to apply to Somerville, and one of the main reasons why was because I liked the look of the college. It's quite big, open. You can walk on the grass, which for me suggests that it has really relatively chill vibes. I met a few people kind of, actually, I only met people during interviews, but I think just in general, I think just the vibe that I got from Somerville was quite cool. That would be quite calm and relaxed. And that's kind of been realized, I think, having been there in first year. So that's kind of why I chose to apply. But you guys?
I mean, I can sort of speak from a different perspective. I didn't apply to Somerville. I applied elsewhere, interviewed elsewhere, and then was pulled here after interviews. I'm so glad that I was accepted at Somerville and not elsewhere. I really like the whole just atmosphere in Somerville. It's so friendly and so laid back. And yeah, and the quad, I love the quad. And I never visited Somerville before I got my offer. And so when I first walked in and saw all the grass and all the lovely buildings, I was like, yeah, I'm happy. This is where I want to be. And I think sometimes there is an element of you won't know until you sort of walk into a place. But even though I had never been here before, it worked out well. And I think you do end up just loving wherever you are, especially when the people are as welcoming as they are in Somerville. So.
Yeah, so similar story with me. I actually didn't apply to Somerville originally, but I got pulled during interviews. So I had 2 interviews at a different college and then a 3rd interview at Somerville. I didn't originally apply because, to be honest, I hadn't looked around it before. The open days, you've got so much going on that you can't really see every college. But having been there for the 1 interview and then at open days afterwards and things, I really loved the sort of atmosphere of the place. I thought it was much more suited to me than the college I'd originally applied to, just because of the nice relaxed atmosphere that it has. So if I made the decision again, I think I'd probably go to Somerville instead. But yeah.
Ooh, I'm happy to start with this next question. So the next question is, for students doing joint honours, do you find that departments communicate well with each other to ensure a manageable workload? I would say that for me, yes. So my degree is joint between classics and history, and the way that works is essentially it's 2 essays a week or 2 every 2 weeks, and that's sort of the same in both faculties anyway. So it does really even out. So the way it works is that whereas some people doing straight history will choose certain topics or certain modules each term, I sub some of them out for classics modules or ancient history modules. So essentially it completely evens out. So I'm doing the exact same amount of work as somebody on a straight history degree. But I think that is partly due to the 2 faculties that I'm working with. I don't know if it's a bit different for other subjects, but definitely for me, it's manageable and it's no more than if I was doing a sort of not a joint honours degree.
Yeah, so I'd say relatively similar for me. So of course I'm doing history and French. My degree is kind of split between the modern languages and the history department. And the specific kind of communication that happens is between my history tutors and my French tutor. And I'd say that they do communicate very well, especially when it came to choosing my modules, because there was a whole kind of a lot of calculation and stuff and timetabling that had to go into that. But they managed that really well. They communicated very well with each other, as well as keeping me in the loop. And I think over the first year, I'd probably say that in terms of workload, there were points where, kind of as Laurie says, this kind of 2 essays every 2 weeks and 2 essays every week. I'd say to a certain point, maybe it's maybe a little bit more than straight history, but I do think that we shouldn't exaggerate the kind of difference between a straight history degree and joint honours. I really don't think it's that much more. That may change during finals, I don't know. But overall, I think the actual way that the workload is managed means that it will never feel kind of suffocating or like it's like an unbearable workload. At least I definitely didn't feel like that during my first year, and I don't expect to feel like that in second year either. So it's good overall. There's a third question. I guess all of us can probably answer this one. So it's, where are you from originally, and is Oxford a big culture shock? So when I'm not in Oxford, I live in an area of Kent called Dartford, but I grew up in southeast London. Culturally, Oxford is quite different. I'm from a Nigerian background, and my area has a lot of people that are Nigerian. If not Nigerian, then they're kind of Black or from an African background. So I'm quite used to being around a lot of people like that. And truthfully, I guess in terms of like proportion, Oxford doesn't have as many. But that being said, there's always communities that you can plug into within Oxford. And because of that, that kind of helps to soften the culture culture shock. And one other thing is that I really think it's been a really good thing, a really enjoyable thing to meet people from a wider range of backgrounds and kind of different cultures whilst at university. So it is a difference of culture, but I don't think I experienced a shock, just it was different.
Yeah, so for me, I live in Somerset, so I'm right in the middle of the countryside. And I didn't actually find coming to Oxford that big a sort of culture shock. In fact, I thought, because it's a city, but it's still quite a small city, it's kind of quite a nice stepping stone between, living somewhere really rural and sort of stepping up into that urban environment. So for me, it was quite a sort of nice transition.
Yeah, so actually quite similar. I'm from South Wales. I don't think I found it as much as a culture shock as I expected it to be, going from where I live to Oxford. The biggest thing that I found was, the variety of people you'll meet. So obviously, I've grown up in quite a small town and I've known the people that I've known my whole life. And there's something lovely about that and I love it. But going to Oxford, I suddenly met all these people from all over the country and actually all over the world, from very different backgrounds with very different experiences. And for me, that's the biggest thing that shocked me, was that I'd never come across that before. And it's something that I really love. And it's something that I hold really close to me because I know that this will help me develop. I think Oxford as a university, I was quite shocked by the sort of, it's quite an intense environment to be in academically. And, I really thrive off of that. So I'm really glad. But I'd never had that before with any of my schools. And while I've always been quite academic, that wasn't necessarily what everyone else around me was focused on. So that was a big shock for me. That's not something I expected. But again, it's something that I'm really glad of. It really suits me.
Okay, so we've got another question in, which is what student societies are involved in college? Sorry, my computer's sorry. Yeah, so what student societies are you involved in, college or university level? So myself, I'm part of the Somerville Music Society. College has a really active music society. There's lots of different sort of events that go on throughout the term. So that's great to get involved with.
And also at the university level, there's loads of choice. You can literally join anything. So personally, I'm involved in the netball team in college. All the sports teams are really great. They're open to everyone from complete beginners to experienced players. So if that's something you're into, then absolutely give it a go. It's a really good opportunity to just try something new. And also at university level, there's a lot of sort of cultural nationality, I guess, societies. So I'm also very involved with the Welsh Society, which is really nice to just sort of meet other people that are from the same place as you. And there's just so much choice. And I say that get involved in as much as you can. It's a great opportunity to meet new people, try new things, experience new experiences.
Yeah, I can only really echo that. I think one of the greatest things I think for first year for me and really feeling part of the Oxford community has been by kind of being part of societies. One of the big things that I do is I play for the university basketball team, and that takes up quite a bit of time, but I've really enjoyed it as like a nice little break from work. I'm doing work regularly, and over this next year I'll also be doing stuff with the Somerville basketball team and kind of captaining that. I don't know if that's a word actually, but leading that. So that'll be a great kind of thing. I also do stuff like the Christian Union in college and overall in the kind of university, and then kind of Afro-Caribbean Society as well as a great community that I'm part of. And then some other few small societies here and there. So basically, any kind of interest that I have, I just looked for a society that kind of reflects it, and it's been really, really good. We have a fifth question, which is, how has it been being an Oxford student during the pandemic? Oh, that's a hard question. I'll give a short answer, and then I'm sure everyone else can kind of elaborate more. I think it has been a challenge. I think it would be. It would just be truthful if I didn't say it wasn't a challenge. I had to kind of adapt and find ways to really connect with people, despite not being able to meet as many people as normal, or at least not in the normal situations. And I think in our second term when we were at home, that was especially difficult. But I think thankfully tutors having that one-to-one contact means that you are able to have some kind of it's things are able to adapt, I guess, to your situation. And my tutors were kind of very willing to hear how I was doing and try and kind of facilitate changes if need be, if I was like struggling with work. But nonetheless, it has been hard because, yeah, it kind of took a bit of that social aspect of uni away. But I do still think there were other ways to kind of make up for that in different communities.
Yeah, I think, again, I think the easiest way I can sort of explain it is that it was new. I think being a student during the pandemic, it's not something that I ever thought I'd have to do. And also, I think partly as me having been a first year last year, I didn't really know any different. And, you know, I went into my first year knowing that things were going to be online, that we were not going to have all these big events throughout the year. And I think knowing that, I think it made it a bit easier for me during the year. But yeah, like Sam said, there's a lot of sort of points of contact, and college was great and university was great, especially during that second term where we were all at home, and it got quite easy to go into the whole, well, I don't have anything else to do, so I'm going to work all day. I'm going to read all this stuff. And that was probably not the best idea on my behalf. But, you know, having the personal tutors and having that sort of one-on-one, like, how are you doing, for me was really, really good. And it helped me sort of make my way through what was already quite a difficult transition from sort of school to uni. But having not been in school, you know, from March and then starting at Oxford in October, that transition was a bit more sort of like, oh, I'm going to have to sit down and write an essay for the first time in like almost a year. But having the personal tutors and college there to just help with that was really, really nice.
Yeah, so I very much agree with what the other two have just said. It was definitely challenging in a lot of ways. You definitely miss out on the social aspect much more than you would in a normal year, I suppose. But I think that's where kind of the strength of the college system really comes in again. You even when, you know, social interactions sort of cut or limited quite a lot, the fact that you're in a college with a relatively small group of students allows you to kind of interact with people more when the opportunities sort of presents itself. The term we had at home was difficult study wise. As Larry said, it was very, very easy to get sort of trapped in the whole work mindset. But definitely the sort of the amount of contact hours you get from the tutorial system definitely sort of helps with that to keep you in check in that sense.
Okay, question number 6. So this is, how balanced is the workload for joint honours? So like we said earlier, in my experience, it's pretty balanced. You don't tend to get any more work than if you were not doing a joint honours degree. So like I said, the way it works for mine is that I sub out modules that I would be doing in a straight history degree, and I do ancient history ones instead. And essentially what that means is that the work I have is very similar to a straight history degree, and it's just a different kind of work in some respects. And that's the one thing that I would say about sort of doing something. You would think the sort of history and ancient history are very, very similar, and they are, but you're often dealing with sort of different kinds of sources, which can sometimes make it feel a lot more, because you're having to sort of switch from like, oh, you know, this was written 20 years ago and this was written 600 BC. And you have to approach them very differently. That's the one thing that I would say can sometimes make it feel a bit like you're doing more, but it is very balanced.
Yeah, I think just following up from that, I think it can be a little bit different in history and modern languages, simply because I think it probably works a bit differently, in the sense that rather than kind of subbing out modules for language modules, it's more like you kind of have what you have to do on the language side, and then the literature, and then the history as well. So I guess it's much less guaranteed to be 50-50 balanced. And I think it's much more to do with the fact that your workload, the amount of time that you spend working on each may be balanced. But the actual number of exams that you do, for example, would be quite different. So I know that with my in first year, for example, I had more exams for French than I did for history, even though maybe the actual work that I committed to both would have been much more equal. And I think what's good about that is it means you can really adjust your degree according to what your kind of strengths are. So I know that when it came to choosing the modules for my finals, so from second to fourth year, what I was able to do is really focus on the modules that I wanted to do, whether that be more for French or more for history. So it is balanced, but you can also adjust the balance between the subjects as you want. So we have another question, which is, why did you choose to apply for your subject? Mine's quite quick. I knew I wanted to do a language, and I knew I wanted to do a year abroad, and that kind of limited the choice. And I knew I loved history, and I felt that the two worked quite well together. So history and French was quite a natural choice for me, and it's what I applied to at, I think, all the universities I applied for. So for me, it was like quite an instinctive thing.
Yeah, I think my process was, I really struggled picking a subject. In the space of like 3 years, from sort of year 11 to year 13, I wanted to do maths, I wanted to do chemistry, I wanted to do law, I wanted to do classics. And then I was going through all these things and thinking, but I enjoy them all, like, how am I supposed to decide? And then I eventually sort of settled on, okay, so like, I really love history, I enjoy my lessons in school, I enjoy doing the work outside of school. And then I was sort of between history and classics, and I really didn't know which one I wanted to do. And there was bits of both that I really loved the idea of. And it was actually at an open day. I went to one of the summer open days at Oxford, and I said to somebody in the history faculty, like, yeah, I really can't decide, like, I want to do both. And they were like, well, why don't you do ancient and modern history? And I was like, what? Does this exist? And so then I did a bit of research into that, and I found that it just sort of blended the bits of both that I wanted to do. But it was both of the bits that I enjoyed the most. So I'd say mostly the reason I chose it is because that was what interested me. It's what sort of got me going. It's what I wanted to talk about to somebody who knew what they were talking about. And I enjoyed it. Like, you can't do a degree unless you enjoy it. So
yeah, so for me, I'd been playing sort of instruments and stuff since primary school, but I kind of didn't decide up until I got to sixth form that I wanted to study music. And it was kind of just as I got more and more involved in it, and I was down to 3 subjects with my A-levels stuff, I just realised that music was something that I really enjoyed. I think enjoyment's a huge amount of it. If you're passionate about something, it just doesn't feel like an effort to have to study all day. So yeah, that was kind of the deciding factor for me, is just that I got a lot of enjoyment out of the subject. So I decided I wanted to sort of take it further.
Sorry, it's a long question. So this is about, how did I link history and French to my personal statement? Did I do a paragraph for each? And then when you discuss them together? Well, the question kind of has the answer, which is, yeah, this is exactly how I did it, actually. I did how I structured my personal statements. Of course, I had my introduction paragraph, which just explained kind of my overall interest. Quite short. Then I had a paragraph which was on history and had quite a historical focus, looking at things like historiography and like a specific historical kind of situation, which wasn't actually linked to France in any way. And then I had a paragraph where I really brought together history and French, so using kind of French for history and history for French. And then I had a section which was much more French focused. And yeah, the real merit of doing that is because your interviews won't necessarily be interlinked in any shape or form. So you might have a French interview that's just discussing French, and then the history interview just discussing history. But your tutors will nonetheless want to see that you can weave them both together, so that you can, to know that, you know, you studying both will enable you to progress well in both. So yeah, that is, I think, probably the best way to structure your personal statement if you're doing history and a modern language, or even history and maybe any other joint school. But that's not to say it's the only way. And I think you can experiment and kind of find what works best for you if there is something else that you think could work well for your personal statement.
So next question, Laurie and Bobby, what did each of you put on your personal statements? So mine was, I think, very similar to Sam's. I did an introduction, a paragraph on history, and then a paragraph on ancient history / classics, because I was applying for sort of a variety of degrees across the different unis, and tutors will know that you're not necessarily applying for the same thing everywhere, so there's going to be a bit of variation. So in my history paragraph, I essentially picked a book that I'd really enjoyed, and I talked about that book. and why it interested me and what I thought about it and how I wanted to develop that in that way. And then on my sort of ancient paragraph, I actually talked about a trip that I'd taken to Rome and how I'd seen all the sort of the ruins and everything. And I talked about then several books that I'd read about that. And really mostly just showing my interest and my passion for what I wanted to study. And I think especially if for things like history, the likelihood is it's going to be including books or documentaries or podcasts or something like that. Really sort of hone in on why you found them interesting and why you would like to study them further, rather than just being like, oh yeah, so I read this book. So really sort of work on like why you read it and why you want to study it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so for me, I basically use my personal statement to sort of show how sort of passionate I was about the subject and how big a role music sort of played in my life. So I started with kind of, you know, where I started learning instruments and stuff, and built through to how, you know, I'm talking about my reactions to concerts that I go to and things like that. And I sort of use that to just talk about why music sort of captivates me personally, and just basically showed how kind of invested I was in it, I suppose. Okay, so the next question is, what's the tutorial like? Are they scary? So tutorials are very intense, is how I'd say. There's sort of nowhere to hide with them. It's very much about exploring your thoughts and getting down to the root of sort of the issues that you're discussing. I wouldn't necessarily say they're scary. I wouldn't say that at all, actually. No, I suppose they're really enjoyable, but they're certainly challenging. I think it's one thing that you sort of realize quite quickly is you get as much out of them as you put in. So if you don't put in enough prep for a tutorial, it won't be as beneficial as one that you've, you know, thought about a lot beforehand, because then the ideas that you're discussing are kind of more developed.
Yeah, I'd say I agree. I don't think scary is the right word. I think definitely my first tutorial, I was slightly terrified, but purely because, you know, it was new. I'd never done it before, but you do very quickly get used to it. But that doesn't take away they're quite intimidating to sort of go into a room with someone who is an expert on your subject and have this really in-depth discussion where you can't be reliant on your notes because you can't be flicking through your notes. It's a conversation at the end of the day. And I think that it is very challenging. You know, you're put on the spot and you're asked questions that perhaps you haven't thought about before, or you've not really just considered how you'd put it into words even. And then all of a sudden you're sat and everyone in your tutorial is sort of looking at you really expectantly and you're like, oh, like I have to sort of explain what's happening in my brain right now. And that can be really, really intimidating, but it is such a great way of learning. And that's something that I found it's what, you know, for a lot of people, and especially like everyone at Oxford, it's what works for us. Like that is how, and finding that way to sort of connect the points in your head and putting them into words and explaining them to the people in your tutorial, that's just a really valuable way of learning. And then also listening to the perspectives of everyone else in your tutorial partners and your tutor. It just gives a little bit of a different sort of twist on something from a perspective that perhaps you hadn't thought of before, and that's really, really useful.
Yeah, and I think one final thing that I'll just add is that I think your approach to a tutorial, as well as the tutor's approach, has a big impact on how you feel within that tutorial. So when I kind of go into tutorials, I try to kind of take away all the kind of, I don't know, the mystery about it and make it generally what it is, which is a discussion. And that in being that discussion, then if there's something, I won't try and speak in a way that kind of won't allow me to be comfortable. I want to speak in a way that's comfortable, that still allows me to kind of convey my opinion. And I think that just makes tutorials a bit more comfortable for me. And then the truth is, of course, some tutors will be a bit more formal, perhaps, and then therefore their tutorials will be a bit more formal. But I think the combination of experiences, whether you have a tutor who's very chill in their tutorial, maybe they get you to sit on the sofa and you have a chat at the start, or whether there's one who kind of goes straight in and is very, pinpoint and just kind of straight into the academic discussion. Both of their merits, and I think overall tutorials are really beneficial. So I think that kind of benefit that you get out of it kind of tends to override any kind of starting worries or fears you may have.
Next question. What are some of the best things about Somerville? So just to start, I'd say the people. It's one of the friendliest places that I've ever been, and especially sort of starting at Oxford. I think Oxford is sort of slightly shrouded in mystery. It comes across a bit intimidating, and when you sort of walk in as a fresher, and then you walk into this lovely college where everyone just wants to get to know you and make sure that you're settled, and that's really, really nice. And for me as well, I like that Somerville isn't as close to the centre of town, if that makes sense. We're a little bit sort of a 10-minute walk from the centre, I'd say, sort of max. And I really like that. It means that I get to go out and have a walk anytime I want to get to the library, but also that we're sort of not in the middle of things. It's a bit quieter, a bit more chilled, I find. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the kind of atmosphere that the college has is a real benefit. It feels very relaxed. You feel like you can just kind of enjoy yourself. You don't get the sense that it's kind of a pressured academic environment in any sense. It's just sort of a nice, comfortable place to live, and that's something that I really like about it.
And another good thing is the quad. Yeah, the quad's nice. I just kind of like being able to have a quad, having grass, having space, and I think those kind of physical things about college are really important, kind of to me as well. Just when it's somewhere that you're going to live for so long, and also it has accommodation for all of the entirety of your degree. Another really good thing about it. So yeah, overall, it's just a good college. Perfect. So yeah, I think that's the end of this. We hope that kind of our questions and our answers have been helpful for you, and that you kind of consider Somerville. I guess I'll pass over to Laurie and Bobby to kind of say the goodbyes.
Yeah, just hope that this has been of some help and that you sort of enjoyed the open day, I guess. Nice virtual open day to sort of finish the year. I guess this is the last of the year. But yeah, bye.
Yeah, thank you for all your questions. It's been great to hopefully we've been some help. And yeah, thank you for listening through it all, I guess.